A frightened man ran through the night shadows, desperately trying to escape his pursuers, unaware that these were the last moments of his life. Cornered, he begged his pursuer for mercy, offering money and jewels, but the hunter only wanted his death. The killer turned out to be just a 17-year-old high school student, whose young age concealed an experienced and ruthless mercenary. The usual school routine awaited him during the day, boring lessons that he usually slept through, and loneliness without any friends. He had no friends, only a local bully sometimes tried to bully him, but the guy calmly drove the offender away every time. No one, including the bully, even guessed what a deadly predator was hiding behind the mask of an ordinary student. All that was left for the bully after the defeat was to try to find a new target for his antics. No one in the class was afraid of him anymore, so every time he had to leave in irritation without achieving the desired result. One day, while getting ready to take a nap in class, the boy noticed a strange magic circle in the middle of the classroom, and all the students were sucked into an incomprehensible portal. Opening his eyes, Caleb realized that they had been transported to an unknown place with architecture that was strikingly different from anything they had seen before. The realization came instantly. They found themselves in another world, completely different from their usual reality. The captain of the school team, taking on the role of leader, called everyone to calm down and began checking whether anyone had been hurt during the move. Jeremy, known for his rebellious nature, snorted in displeasure, ignoring the footballer's attempts to restore order. Caleb listened and heard the approaching footsteps of a man and a woman, wanting to know what these unknown people wanted from them. The people who suddenly appeared expressed admiration for the self-control of the young hero candidates, surprising the school children. Caleb noticed a strange aura surrounding the two. The man was well-built and strong, while the girl had a hidden power. Eleanor introduced herself as the Archbishop of the Holy Land of Digrest, and the Knight Henry was her faithful bodyguard. Caleb decided to take the initiative into his own hands and politely but persistently asked to explain what was going on and how they got here. Eleanor revealed to the stunned teenagers that she had summoned them into this world as the chosen saviors of humanity, capable of defeating the Demon King. At first, no one could believe these words. They sounded too fantastic, and Jeremy rudely expressed his disbelief. Jeremy's abruptness forced Henry to intervene, who was clearly hostile to the impudent fellow. Despite Eleanor's attempts to calm the knight, Jeremy, blinded by anger, rushed at Henry with his fists. Caleb knew how reckless this was, since the knight had a weapon that could cut down the inexperienced teenager with one blow. Henry made a lightning-fast movement with his sword, leaving a bleeding cut on Jeremy's face, a warning for him to stop. Eleanor commanded them to lay down their weapons in a commanding voice, realizing that they had already scared the arriving heroes enough. Instead of apologizing, the princess began to explain that everyone who found themselves here needed to fulfill their destiny. This world was invaded by the Demon King, and humanity was on the brink of extinction, including Eleanor's country. While everyone listened intently, Caleb could only marvel at how cliched the reason for their presence here was. The other school children tried to explain to the saint that they had never been to war, and many could not cope with the shock of what they had experienced. Henry sternly explained that the candidates had no choice. Either they defeated the Demon King, or they would never return home. The teenagers could not come to terms with what had happened because they did not have the experience that would allow them to defeat a powerful enemy. Jeremy continued to be outraged by the frivolity of these people, who had called them for their own good, without thinking about the consequences. Henry realized that Jeremy was the only one of those called up who had not lost his fighting spirit, but he was wary of his unrestrained character. Eleanor used magic to heal Jeremy's wounds and sincerely asked him for help because there was no other hope in this world. The princess explained that her miraculous powers were granted to her as the heir to the throne and extended to others. Michael understood that the promise of magic would in no way compensate for their lack of combat experience in the upcoming fight. Eleanor promised an intensive training program and cared to prepare them for the challenges ahead. Michael urged the others to do everything they could to protect this country and its people from the threat of the Demon King. With the princess's blessing, they had a chance not only to survive, but also to return home, which seemed like the only acceptable option. One by one, the students began to gain various magical abilities, telekinesis, power over fire, and much more. The only one left without a blessing was Caleb, and Eleanor was surprised to see no change in his strength. It soon became clear that Caleb had gained a unique skill, the ability to assess, which allowed him to recognize the strength and skills of any target. Deciding to test his new ability, Caleb directed it at himself to better understand his capabilities. He noted with interest that everything displayed was very reminiscent of a game menu, clear and easy to perceive. Some of Caleb's classmates began to ridicule him for his seemingly useless gift and gloated over his situation. Caleb saw no reason to rejoice, realizing that the abilities he had acquired were just a tool that could be taken away. Eleanor suggested that the boys take a rest to gain strength before starting training in the new world. While everyone was sleeping peacefully, Caleb decided to find out more about this new world by going on a night reconnaissance mission. The first to cross Caleb's path were knights, excitedly discussing the newly arrived hero candidates and doubting their abilities. Caleb wandered around the grounds, mapping the castle fortress and pondering the possibility of penetrating the princess's citadel. On the way back, Caleb saw several of his classmates out on the street practicing their new magical abilities. Watching his classmates' clumsy attempts at magic, Caleb suddenly felt someone's presence behind him. Turning around, Caleb saw a huge lizard, attracted by the girl's bursts of magic and ready to attack. Using his assessment skill, the boy realized that the monster was strong enough and posed a serious threat. Without thinking, Caleb rushed to help his classmates, ready to confront the dangerous creature. Despite its impressive size, the lizard turned out to be clumsy, which allowed Caleb to wound it and distract it from the girls. Sarah tripped and fell, finding herself at the mercy of the enraged beast, but instead of attacking, the lizard suddenly jumped over her. When Sarah opened her eyes, she was amazed to see that someone had already managed to deal with the monster. Not understanding who saved them, but not wanting to take further risks, the girls hurried to hide in the castle, leaving Caleb alone. Caleb was in no hurry to leave, intending to take his weapon, but sensing someone's presence, he decided to quickly hide. A robed demon emerged from the shadows, watching what had happened with undisguised interest and assessing Caleb's abilities. The demon was pleased to see that not all of the hero candidates were helpless newbies, and was especially interested in Caleb. The next morning, Henry showed off the carcass of the slain monster, explaining that such creatures were the servants of the Demon King. Scientist Stefan, having examined the remains of the monster, discovered traces of complex witchcraft, indicating the work of a mid-level demon. Stefan explained that demons who had reached a certain level of power could control monsters using slave witchcraft. Before the transformation, these creatures were ordinary animals, but afterward they became the embodiment of evil with the Demon King as the source of life. Henry, seeing some of the disciples turn pale with horror, decided to take Stephen away, interrupting his story. Caleb was determined to find Stefan later to find out more information about this world and its dangers. Caleb was concerned about who was controlling the attacking lizard, and he had to find out the identity of the mysterious demon watcher. At the moment of killing the monster, Caleb felt someone's presence and barely managed to hide from the observer in time. A creepy, inhuman voice sounded in Caleb's head, asking him not to be afraid, which made the guy even more wary. The school children reacted sharply to what was happening, swearing among themselves and wanting to return home as soon as possible. Not understanding the seriousness of the situation, Caleb realized the futility of these quarrels, seeing how his classmates behaved frivolously, intoxicated by the blessing they had received. Eleanor sternly warned the boys that without proper training they would simply die in this dangerous world. The good news was that the speed of the heroes' progress was much greater than that of the locals. A week later, Caleb was sitting in the library, studying the tome, and noting that he could now communicate with the locals without a language barrier. Looking out the window at his training comrades, Caleb once again felt bitterness over the unsuitability of his skill for direct combat. When the princess's decision to ban Caleb from participating in general training became known, many could not help but ridicule him. While the others honed their fighting skills, Caleb delved into the study of demons and kept a close eye on his comrades. The heroes developed quickly, and the most prominent among them were Ray, Jeremy, Caroline, Amelia, and Sarah. Michael surpassed all of his classmates and was already able to defeat local knights, demonstrating incredible progress in his abilities. Michael's initial scores were at D or F level, but within a week they skyrocketed to A and B levels, surprising everyone around him. Even if Michael was originally a genius, such a leap seemed unimaginable, clearly indicating the influence of the blessing on his body. After practice, Caleb's classmates surrounded him, mocking him and chasing him off the field, believing that he didn't know how to fight at all. One of his former friends tried to mockingly pat Caleb on the shoulder, but unexpectedly for everyone, he became a victim of his lightning-fast reaction. Eleanor, upon appearing, expressed her joy at the heroes' rapid progress and suggested speeding up their training schedule for future trials. The next task for the students was to fight not with each other, but with a real monster, to test their real fighting skills. The next day, the high school students were taken out into the forest and tasked with dividing into small groups to effectively hunt monsters. Teams were formed from 2 or 3 people, and everyone tried to join the strongest, fearing the upcoming tests. The only ones left uninvolved were Caroline and Caleb, who were afraid to invite, and they decided to form their own group. Eleanor promised a special reward to the team that defeated the most monsters, after which everyone began to complete the task. Caroline warned Caleb about the superiority of her blessing and asked him not to interfere with her work while she was hunting. Caleb didn't argue, which seemed to anger Caroline, and began scanning the area for the first enemies. The first monster they encountered was a goblin, which Caroline dealt with using her ability to control the enemy's mind. Even for the strong Caroline, holding off the goblin for long proved difficult, and she quickly began to lose strength. Caleb calmly suggested to Caroline not to delay with the enemy and deal with him, fearing an attack from other monsters from behind. Caroline hesitated, feeling sorry for the goblin because of his similarity to humans, but Caleb reminded them that all monsters here were their enemies. After the first goblin, 3 more attacked, which Caroline immobilized and forced to break their necks using her power. Even proud Caroline admitted that being in real combat and seeing dead bodies shocked her more than she expected. Caleb calmly explained that if she didn't kill the monsters would take the chance and kill her, emphasizing the brutality of the situation. Caroline was struck by Caleb's calm. A guy with no ability to defend himself remained cool and offered to move on. Things were not going so well for the rest. Despite the strength of the fighters, their enemy turned out to be difficult and forced them to retreat. The hero's opponent was a demonic bear, which had greater resistance to attacks and superior strength. In another part of the forest, Caroline remembered her grandfather who raised her and decided to return to her world for him. The girl did not have time to thank her grandfather for his kindness and did not want to upset him with her disappearance. Caleb interrupted Caroline's thoughts by advising her to change direction so as not to get lost in the forest. Caroline was confident that they wouldn't get lost if they went in the direction they had chosen, which Caleb considered a big mistake. The girl was irritated by Caleb's behavior. Recently, he had coldly demanded that the monsters be killed, but now he was acting distant. Hearing cries for help, Caleb and Caroline decided to head to their classmate to help her. Emilia and Ray were defeated, but Caroline, who arrived in time, managed to stop the beast attacking them. Caleb, having assessed the situation, ordered Ray to grab Emilia in his arms and quickly leave before they got hurt even more. While Caroline held off the enemy, Caleb assessed its strength, noting the particularly strong defenses due to its fur and shell. As Caroline's control weakened, she realized that her legs were completely immobilized and she could not move. Caleb pulled out a smoke bomb, hoping to throw the monster off course, since there was no other way out of the situation. The guy managed to take Caroline, and they hid behind a tree while the disgruntled monster looked for them nearby. Caleb explained that he made the smoke bomb out of boredom, although in reality he always carried a gun with him. Caroline awkwardly apologized to Caleb for putting them in danger despite her decision to help. Caleb didn't appreciate the apology, noting that if the girl were always so polite, people would like her more. The argument quickly ended with the arrival of Michael and his company, who decided to deal with the monster. Michael wounded his opponent, but not fatally, which only enraged the monster even more. Michael reassured his assistants, explaining that calm and composure in battle would lead to a better outcome. The experienced demon assassin, who was watching the battle, rejoiced, realizing that he had found the perfect target for himself. Having failed to defeat the young heroes with the help of the armored bear, the demon decided that they would meet again soon. The demon decided to change plans and finish off Michael, who posed a huge threat here and now. As the demon was close to its target, Caleb crept up and threateningly held his blade to its neck. The demon was forced to temporarily admit defeat while he came up with a tactic to free himself from Caleb. Caleb was cruel enough to cut off the demon's leg ligaments, preventing him from escaping, and forced him to answer questions. The demon realized that it was useless to resist. Caleb seemed special, surrounded by an eerie aura, as if he always knew about surveillance. Caleb actually knew about the surveillance and was able to capture the demon using Michael as bait. Caleb wanted to learn about the structure of this world, believing that understanding the local rules was essential for aliens from another universe. Instead of answers, the demon bit the poison in his cheek, quickly ending his life without revealing any secrets or mysteries. Turning around, Caleb saw a horrified Caroline, whose gaze was fixed on the demon's body lying on the ground. Caleb explained that all the monsters they encountered were puppets of this killer, who was trying to eliminate them. Caroline had a hard time accepting that killing a demon that wanted them dead was a justifiable action. Caleb admitted that in reality, he worked as a hired killer, which explained his ability to sense demonic surveillance. At first it seemed like a stupid joke, but looking at the dead body, Caroline realized that this was their reality. Caleb asked to keep quiet about what he saw so as not to disturb his classmates, who were already frightened by Emily's injuries. Caroline marveled at Caleb's kindness to his classmates who had treated him cruelly, but he only pitied their inexperience. In fact, Caleb said this to gain the trust of the girl, whose control could be useful to him in future battles. Emily's classmates surrounded her, and the girl, with the blessing of healing, completely cured her, although she was still sleeping. When the excitement died down, everyone crowded around Michael's company, admiring their victory over a strong opponent. Only Caroline understood that Caleb had exceeded not only her expectations, but everyone else's in this challenge. The princess and knight appeared and congratulated the students on their return from training in the forest. The students began to question the lack of help at a critical moment, but they considered it an important part of the training. The students started asking questions about how such a powerful monster appeared in the forest. The princess explained that a demon killer probably lived in the forest, since armored bears had never been seen there before. The princess ordered to strengthen the forest's security and to intensify the heroes' training to prepare them for real threats. The class was outraged, and Michael explained that this was too cruel, considering their successful passage through their first real battle. Jeremy was outraged by the way they were treated after what they had been through, reminding them that they had not asked to be made heroes. Henry reminded Jeremy that everyone who came to this world was only pawns in the hands of the princess, with no right to vote. Michael contained Jeremy's anger, recommending that they not engage in conflict so as not to become enemies not only of the demons, but also of the state. Henry praised Michael for his patience and asked the others to remain obedient so that no valuable pawn would be harmed. Henry and Eleanor left, warning that intense training would begin the next day, and told everyone to rest. The next day, the hero candidates came under the leadership of Stefan, who became their new teacher. Stefan knew that there was a healer in the group who helped the badly injured Amelia during the forest test. After praising the doctor, Stefan explained that the training would take place at his research center, where they would fight monsters. Behind the bars of the research center, many monsters were imprisoned, used for experiments and training. The princess explained that the center also served as a field training ground to prepare soldiers for real battles. This was beneficial because Stefan could gather data based on the heroes' battles with monsters. As Caleb watched the start of the combat practice, he noted the calm of his comrades despite the pressure to fight. Although the fear in their movements was obvious, the fighting girls quickly began to give up their positions, seemingly losing to the monster. The leader, worried about the lives of his comrades, asked Stefan to stop the battle, considering the monster too dangerous for them. Stefan, following the princess's order to be stricter, believed that heroes with divine blessings would not lose to a weak monster. The hero could not believe that the hero's main problem was fear and hesitation, and not a lack of strength. The bonus was that each person could receive another blessing when their divine blessing level increased. Caleb noticed this and notified Michael that he had another blessing. Michael's new blessing turned out to be a monster-killing attack, greatly enhancing his fighting abilities. Hearing about this, Michael decided to test his new powers in battle against the monster. He activated the sword that protected against evil and the deadly attack for the monster, and began to fight. Michael's first attack hit his opponent's arm, then his head, showing that even an armored bear would not be a serious problem. Caleb hoped that as he leveled up, he would also receive a new blessing that would enhance his abilities. Jeremy also received a blessing, but Caleb decided to keep quiet about it and focus on his training instead. After midnight, some of the boys gathered in Jeremy's room, discussing a plan to kill Henry and kidnap Eleanor. The majority supported Jeremy's idea, suggesting to kill the princess so that she would no longer summon anyone to her world. Ray was not supportive of the idea, but Jeremy convinced him to join, arguing that it would increase their chances of success. Ray didn't want to kill anyone, but remembering the wounded Amelia, he realized that he had no other choice, and agreed. The next day, during the hero's training, Michael stood out in particular, demonstrating his mastery of the sword. Michael confessed to Caleb that he still felt weak and couldn't find a way to become stronger. It seemed to him that even being able to defeat half of the knights was not an indicator of the strength needed to protect everyone. Michael was concerned about Eleanor's treatment of them as pawns, realizing that following orders did not guarantee safety. The hero realized that he couldn't obey orders forever, especially if Eleanor ordered him to fight to the death with the Demon King. Michael was ready for this and wanted to be the one to fight the Demon King to save the lives of others. Caleb thought Michael's plan was good, but he doubted that Eleanor would agree to the hero's single-handed battle with the Demon King. It was to gain Eleanor's recognition that Michael trained so hard, striving to become the strongest among the heroes. Their conversation was interrupted by the princess who suddenly appeared, warning Stefan of her departure and asking him to take care of the heroes. She was leaving for a few days to resolve political issues. After reporting this, she immediately left. On the way, Henry asked the princess to stop pretending, reminding her that she knew about Jeremy's plans against them. Eleanor was curious about what Jeremy would come up with, so she decided to ignore his preparations for the rebellion for now. Henry did not object, but he feared that the united candidates for heroes could create serious problems. Eleanor was sure that no one could defeat her, considering it simply impossible. The princess saw the benefit in the situation, planning to use it to finally break the will of the heroes. Eleanor was more concerned about another suspicious character, whom she decided to leave alone for now. In the evening, the guy sneaked out of the dorm and defeated the lizard monster in 13 seconds, testing his abilities. After checking his system, Caleb realized that there was no significant change in his performance. After leveling up in a fight with a demon assassin, Caleb gained a new skill, but didn't know how to use it. Suddenly, a monster unexpected for this territory appeared, which turned out to be very strong and resistant to attacks. Despite the momentary fear, the hero decided to use the situation to test his new ability to display weaknesses. Once the weak spot on the back of the monster's head was noticed, Caleb was able to quickly defeat it. Although the skill proved useful, the boy realized that this power was not enough to survive in the new world. Realizing the need to become stronger, he decided to increase his power as quickly as possible to survive in this dangerous world. Caleb noticed the attacking goblins, but quickly saw their weak points and easily defeated his opponents. The observant young man drew conclusions about the weak points of the monsters and decided to test his new skill on other types of creatures. Suddenly, Caleb heard a person approaching. Caroline had come for him in the middle of the night. The guy warned her about the dangers of walking alone in the forest, but the girl was indignant, believing that these words should belong to her. Caleb explained his habit of night restrictions and the ease of fighting monsters in the dark. A distrustful Caroline asked for an explanation and learned of the experiments with the new blessing. Intrigued, she decided to ask about the blessing, but Caleb turned away indifferently, not seeing the point. The indignant student believed that she had worried in vain, having traveled a long way, which only made her companion laugh. The obvious mockery embarrassed Caroline, but the young man again invited her to return to the room, promising to soon follow her example. Their plans were ruined when the girl noticed smoke coming from the direction of the dormitory. The students ran out of the burning building, running into demons waiting for them. Michael tried to protect his weak classmates, but it seemed pointless due to the growing number of monsters. Not understanding the reasons for the appearance of monsters near the dormitory did not prevent the decision to deal with the threat. Seeing the fire, Caleb and Caroline rushed to help their classmates. Ray, who was met, out of breath and scared, explained the situation. A huge fire had suddenly broken out, and when they ran out, a whole horde of terrible monsters was already waiting for them. Caleb suspected human cunning in the monster's uncharacteristic behavior, realizing that ordinary monsters do not act in such an organized manner. Stefan, sitting on the roof, confirmed the correctness of the young man's guess with a smile, clearly enjoying the chaos that was happening. The boy realized that the presence of the scientist explained the escape of the monsters from the research center where they were kept for experiments. Caleb learned that the monsters were enhanced with special drugs developed by Stefan to perfectly carry out the order and destroy the hero candidates. Caroline's assumption about Eleanor's order turned out to be wrong. The order came from the Demon King himself, which made the situation even more dangerous. The students could not believe Stefan's betrayal, but the scientist did not care. His only goal was to continue his research on demons with the support of the king. The heroes were disgusted by the researcher's passion for his work to the point of obsession, ignoring all moral principles. The scientist, ignoring the condemnation, declared his intention to understand the essence of the monsters at any cost. Stefan gave the order to attack, and the monsters from the fortress wall rushed at the heroes. Caroline reacted in time and managed to stop the attack at the last moment with her control skill, even ordering the monsters to attack their creator. The scientist appreciated the girl's attempt but explained its futility. The monsters continued their attack on his command, ignoring Caroline's control. Stefan explained the superiority of his control technique and ordered the attack again, demonstrating complete power over the creatures. Seeing Caroline's unpreparedness for the attack, Caleb saved her from the monster's attack in time, pulling her aside. The young man ordered her to duck and began to deal with the monsters one by one, demonstrating incredible speed and accuracy. Most of the monsters were defeated, the rest stopped in fear, surprising Stefan with their fear of a guy with a useless blessing. Caleb, after scanning his opponent's skills, realized the reason why Caroline's mind control was ineffective. Stefan's level was much higher. Frightened, the scientist decided to use his secret weapon against the heroes, preparing to summon something terrible. The observer did not notice the approach of new monsters and barely dodged a sudden pillar of fire that burst out of nowhere. A red fire dragon appeared, responding to its master's call, its scales sparkling in the reflections of the flames. The dragon began to attack, and Caleb managed to save Caroline, taking her to a safe distance from the monster's flaming breath. After this, the young man called Ray and asked him to leave, warning him about the seriousness of the dragon's next attack. As the dragon flew towards Caleb, he saw its weak spot on the neck, but the blades broke on the thick scales without causing harm. Jeremy appeared in time and began to attack the dragon with the fire explosion skill, hoping for effectiveness. The attempt was unsuccessful, and Jeremy had to put out the burning clothes on the ground, cursing his failure. Caleb realized that by using his comrade's fire skill, they could defeat the dragon if they coordinated their attack correctly. Jeremy didn't want to cooperate with the loser, but without knowing the monster's weak points, his attacks were useless against the fireproof scales. The distrustful student decided to sort out the situation on his own, ignoring Caleb's advice. After another fiery strike from the dragon, Jeremy realized the pitifulness of his attempts and the need for joint action. Having agreed to help, the young man learned about the dragon's weak spot from his observant comrade. Caleb promised to distract the monster, giving Jeremy time for a decisive attack on the vulnerable point. Stefan, noticing the unification of the heroes, became frightened and gave the dragon the order to attack with maximum force. Following the plan, Caleb distracted the dragon by throwing daggers and irritating the monster by dodging fire attacks. At that moment, Jeremy slipped under the dragon's body and unleashed a powerful fire blast that burned the monster from the inside through a vulnerable spot. Despite his fatigue, the winner looked at the results of his work with satisfaction, realizing the importance of teamwork. Caleb, noticing his comrade's exhaustion, advised him to rest and began asking Stefan about his future plans, preparing for new threats. Stefan knew he had many more monsters at his disposal, confident in his superiority. However, the scientist did not expect that during this time the other heroes would cope with all of his puppets, demonstrating unexpected efficiency. Realizing the hopelessness of the situation, Stefan decided to run away, but was stopped by Ray, who used the wind element. After falling into a water ball created by one of the students, the researcher found himself in front of Caleb, who interrogated him. After agreeing to cooperate, Stefan suddenly died from a curse that the observant young man had read about in the library, leaving the heroes without answers. Michael sadly realized that their situation was becoming more difficult due to the inability to obtain information from enemies who were dying from a mysterious curse. Caleb knew that the threat from the Demon King's army would only grow, requiring them to prepare even more. The next day, the candidates met with Eleanor, who was upset about the incident during her absence. The disciples suspected that Stephen, as a close servant, should have aroused suspicion, but the saint only smiled mysteriously, without giving a direct answer. It turns out that Eleanor didn't expect such damage from a monster lord of Stefan's level, clearly underestimating his abilities. Sarah realized that the saint had known about the scientist's nature from the beginning, but had taken no action, which made her angry. Moreover, Eleanor considered it part of the training, promising even more brutal tests in the future, shocking the hero candidates with this. The disciples were indignant, explaining their proximity to death, but Henry ordered them to remain silent, demanding constant vigilance in this dangerous world. Even Caleb, an experienced mercenary, failed to identify the threat in advance, making the demand for vigilance from ordinary schoolchildren unreasonable and almost impossible to fulfill. To ease the tension, Eleanor announced an upcoming trip to the capital and a grand parade in honor of the heroes, trying to raise their morale. The hero candidates became the talk of the kingdom, and the people decided to throw a grand celebration, unaware of the real difficulties and dangers that the young heroes faced. By nightfall, everyone was already spending the night in the field halfway to the capital, preparing for the upcoming events and thinking about their situation. Jeremy once again gathered his comrades to discuss a plan to escape from Eleanor's control, considering the current situation unbearable. There were only 30 guards around the camp, who did not pose a serious threat to the heroes with their newfound abilities. The rebel decided that this was a great chance to carry out their plan to free themselves and return home. For the first time, the guards were so few in number, and the ordinary knights clearly did not expect a possible rebellion on the part of the young heroes. Caleb, having overheard the conversation, understood that Jeremy was right about the small number of soldiers, but he suspected a catch. The observant young man realized that the reason lay in Eleanor and Henry's confidence in their powers, which were capable of stopping any rebellion. Realizing the risk of rebellion, Caleb decided to turn to Michael for help, explaining the situation and the possible consequences. Several hours later, Jeremy's group gathered in the forest, waiting for the moment to attack, unaware of the opposition that was being prepared. Michael's supporters approached them, urging them to stop and not to act rashly, risking everything they had achieved. They explained that killing Eleanor and the soldiers at this point would do nothing to help them return home, but would only complicate the situation. Sarah echoed this sentiment, acknowledging her irritation at Eleanor's actions, but considering the attack a madness that could cost them their lives. Jeremy was angry, not understanding how they could continue to follow orders after everything that had happened, feeling betrayed. Michael understood his comrade's feelings, but sincerely believed in the possibility of another way out of the situation, calling for patience and strategic thinking. The leader of the heroes planned to become Eleanor's pawn in order to defeat the Demon King himself and ensure everyone's safety, believing in his growing powers. Michael's confidence in his future power and influence over Eleanor shook Jeremy's doubts, making him think. However, the dissatisfied man did not want to wait and suggested that Michael join them for an immediate return home, ignoring the risks. Michael's supporters understood the need to use force to prevent a riot in order to avoid stupidity and possible casualties. Jeremy also realized that a clash was inevitable, and the two groups entered into a standoff, ready to fight. The guards noticed the conflict, but Michael awkwardly explained the situation as a minor quarrel, trying to prevent interference. The rebels were forced to retreat, missing the moment, but Michael's gentleness increasingly irritated Jeremy, strengthening his determination. The next day, the candidates arrived in the capital, admiring the majestic buildings and the colorful crowd of citizens, temporarily forgetting their differences. Henry sternly ordered the crowd to make way for Eleanor and the group of hero candidates, demonstrating the importance of their mission. Seeing the joy of the people, the heroes understood the truth of Eleanor's words about their expectation in the capital, which raised their spirits a little. The Holy Knight Raphael, who met them, greeted the candidates and offered them a rest after the long journey, unaware of the hidden conflicts in the group. The students dispersed to their rooms, some enjoying soft beds, others luxurious baths, temporarily forgetting the hardships of their situation. Caleb surveyed the capital from a high tower, realizing the need to urgently collect information about the real state of affairs in the kingdom. Having descended, the observant young man noticed the abundance of guards in the castle and decided to move unnoticed so as not to arouse suspicion. Caleb soon saw Raphael talking to the soldiers about the arrival of the heroes and the concerns surrounding it, which caught his attention. The guards were worried about a possible cultist invasion and suggested increasing security for safety, revealing a previously unknown threat. Raphael assured of safety while the hero candidates were in the capital, clearly overestimating their capabilities. Realizing the futility of further eavesdropping, Caleb decided to go into town for more information. At the nearest tavern, the young man ordered ale so as not to arouse suspicion and listened to the conversations of the locals. From the discussions, it became clear that the residents criticized the candidates but feared the church that chose the heroes, which indicated the difficult political situation in the kingdom. Caleb decided to ask the tavern owner about local traditions, pretending to be a traveler. The observant youth began to take an interest in the Demon King's believers, trying to understand the scale of the threat. The tavern owner explained that because of the war with the all-powerful Demon King, there were fanatics who admired his power and caused trouble. It turned out that the cultists had been rampaging across the country, recently blowing up several aristocratic homes, which had seriously destabilized the situation. Realizing the seriousness of the problem, Caleb decided to continue investigating, knowing that the hidden cultists could attack at any moment. Suddenly, an out-of-breath Caroline appeared on the young man's path, having spent a long time looking for him all over the city. Caleb explained his absence by the need to gather information about the capital, but the girl asked him not to act alone anymore. The young man insisted on his independence, but seeing Caroline's indignation, he decided to listen to her request for cooperation. Caleb gave her the task of gathering information, and Caroline enthusiastically went to carry out the assignment, glad to be of service. Nearby, a mysterious man in a red cloak was listening intently to their conversation, his eyes glinting ominously in the shadow of his hood. Caleb returned to the castle, frustrated by the paucity of information he had gathered and a growing sense of danger. Suddenly, the young man heard a strange noise behind the door and decided to find out its cause, preparing for a possible threat. In the hall, Caleb encountered agitated classmates animatedly discussing someone's disappearance. One of the girls explained that Caroline had not returned, and they had decided to split up to search, unaware of the real danger. Caleb understood the seriousness of the situation, knowing about Caroline's assignment, and decided to listen to his classmates' ideas while hiding his knowledge. The young man was asked about Caroline, but he lied, saying that he was sleeping in his room so as not to arouse suspicion. Sarah and the others were reluctant to search for the missing woman, but Michael insisted on an immediate search of the city, sensing a possible threat. Once outside, Caleb found the location of his last meeting with Caroline, trying to reconstruct the events. The observant young man noticed Caroline's student ID card on the ground, confirming his worst fears. While Caleb was analyzing the situation, he was suddenly attacked by fanatics from the Church of the Devil, taking him by surprise. The young man quickly dealt with the attackers, leaving one alive for questioning about Caroline's kidnapping. Meanwhile, in the dark dungeon of the Church of the Devil, Caroline was handcuffed, trapped by the cultists. The captive was tormented by members of the sect who tried to extract information about the hero candidates. The sectarians, confident in the schoolgirl's weakness, decided to humiliate her, hoping for a quick capitulation and the disclosure of secrets. Caleb, who was nearby, scanned the cultists' characteristics and realized that they posed a low threat to Caroline. The young man quickly eliminated his opponents and freed the girl, demonstrating his fighting skills. Frightened and shocked, Caroline began to apologize for her carelessness, realizing the danger of the situation. But their peace was short-lived as they were met with another problem in the form of the Holy Knight Raphael, who attacked them, introducing himself as the head of the Demon King Church. Caleb, preparing for battle, realized the gravity of the situation. If the enemy had penetrated so close to Eleanor, the kingdom was in real danger. The young man, having scanned Raphael's characteristics, realized that almost all of the enemy's indicators were at the highest level, requiring maximum caution. After the first attack, Raphael used the power of fire, rushing at Caleb, counting on the impossibility of dodging in the air. However, the Holy Knight did not expect that the boy had a weapon from another world that could change the course of the battle. Caleb fired at the enemy's head, easily hitting his target, but regretting the wasted precious bullet. The young man realized the imperfection of his close combat skills and decided to improve them to increase his chances of survival in the new world. Caroline, who had approached, was frightened when she saw the gun, but did not ask questions, understanding the connection between the weapon and Caleb's past. The girl thanked him for saving her and told him about the impossibility of using magic because of the shackles, revealing new information about the world. Caleb realized that there were many unknown tools in this world that required further study. Throwing a cloak over Caroline's shoulders, the young man suggested leaving, and the girl warned her about the danger from the sectarians. This information was not news to Caleb, as he had already interrogated the men who had attacked him. The captured cultists spoke of an order to kill the hero candidates to bring about universal destruction, revealing the cult's true goals. Caleb, thinking about Caroline's possible death, learned of her status as a hostage to kill the other candidates. The young man concluded that the sectarians were indirectly collaborating with demons, unlike Stefan, due to the absence of a deadly curse. Caleb warned Caroline against letting her guard down, emphasizing the variety of threats in this world. The girl, frightened by the ease of falling into a trap, apologized for her naivety, realizing the seriousness of the situation. At that moment, they saw Michael running towards them, rejoicing at their safety. Caleb told him about the Church of the Demon King and their plans to destroy the hero candidates. Michael realized the difficulty of fighting humans compared to monsters because of the difficulty of recognizing them. He suggested informing Eleanor to strengthen security, although everyone understood the possible futility of this step. Suddenly, there was a loud explosion and smoke rose from the direction one of the groups of students was heading. The three heroes are surrounded by an army of fanatics, forcing them to prepare for a serious battle for their lives and the future of this world. The attack was not limited to this group, but to all classmates who were looking for Caroline. Caleb, having scanned the enemy's skills, realized that their abilities were inferior to Raphael, but they were a fighting force ready to fight. Caroline immobilized most of the opponents, and the young man cold-bloodedly destroyed them one by one. Michael spoke out against this approach, reminding that the attackers were still people, not monsters. The leader of the heroes did not expect a sudden attack from behind, but tried to reach out to the attacker, trying to understand his motives. Caroline wanted to help Michael with her control, but Caleb forbade it, believing that it was time for him to become stronger on his own. Finally, Michael began to win, knocking the weapon out of his opponent's hands, but he did not give up and managed to wound the hero. The young man had no choice but to attack back, overcoming his moral principles. Caleb ordered the wounded cultist to be finished off, explaining the risk of his recovery and another attack on others. Michael did not understand such cold-bloodedness towards a defeated man. The observer explained that as the strongest in the class, Michael must protect his classmates from potential threats. These arguments convinced Michael, and he ended the life of his opponent, overcoming his internal conflict. The rest of the classmates also did well, demonstrating unexpected efficiency. Jeremy, supporting his comrades, dealt with the strongest of the attackers, demonstrating leadership qualities. In Sarah's group, things were similar. The girl burned enemies using her abilities. Sarah noticed that she was the only one fighting, while her friends were doing nothing, afraid of harming people. Enraged, the girl explained the situation but was unable to convince them, and watched in horror as the cultists wounded her friends. Eleanor's sudden appearance changed the course of events, instantly attracting the attention of all the sectarians. The princess explained her intervention as being out of concern for the hero candidates under her care. The believers underestimated the power of one girl, not knowing about Eleanor's true abilities. The saint used control, causing all the believers to fall face down on the ground, completely immobilizing them. Sarah recognized this skill as similar to Caroline's ability, but clearly superior in power and scope. Eleanor explained her intervention by not wanting the candidates to suffer in this situation. The princess expressed hope that in the future, heroes will be able to deal with such threats themselves. Before leaving, Eleanor remembered the need to deal with the fallen believers. Turning to the candidates, the saint ordered them to take the fallen weapons of the sectarians. Eleanor then demanded that the heroes kill these people with their own hands, shocking many with her order. Watching from above, Caleb and Caroline finally understood how the third-level enslavement technique worked. The young man and woman were amazed by the scale of Eleanor's technique, which was capable of subduing an entire crowd at once. Caleb watched the saint closely, trying to think of a way to counter this powerful force. Half a day after the attack by the believers, classmates gathered to discuss what had happened. Sarah admitted that the girls in her group are in a state of shock after what they experienced. Ray expressed anger at Eleanor's actions in forcing the girls to kill with their own hands. Sarah, who was also cursed, was more resilient and was more angry about the situation than traumatized. Michael was frustrated by his inability to protect his comrades from this terrible experience. Even Caroline felt that ending the battle quickly might save the others from the traumatic order. Caleb knew the outcome was inevitable due to the failure to confront Eleanor's greatest threat. After defeating the believers, the group split up to rescue others, but were unable to help Sarah's team. Caleb found solace in killing Raphael, which temporarily reduced the threat posed by the cult. The young man invited Caroline into his room to discuss a new idea to confront Eleanor. Caleb offered to learn how to resist the enslavement technique and asked Caroline for help. The girl agreed but asked for a more detailed explanation of the plan. Caleb then asked Caroline to use her control ability on him as an experiment. The day after the victory over the sect, a grand parade was held in honor of the heroes. The victory over the sectarians showed the townspeople the strength of the candidates, winning their hearts. Caleb wasn't enjoying the parade, focusing on Eleanor and trying to figure out if the attack was part of her plan. After leaving the city, Eleanor ordered the candidates to return to the temple of the city of Alpha on their own. Alpha, the city of their summoning, was under Eleanor's complete control. The saint did not accompany the group, leaving it to Henry to deal with the aftermath of the incident. While some were happy to be back, the girls from Sarah's team were still in shock. The very proximity of Eleanor seemed to cause them great fear. Pleased with the effect of intimidation, the princess left, wishing everyone a good journey. Sarah, angry, hugged her friend, who had not yet dealt with the consequences of the previous night, and was forced to remain silent. That night, Jeremy's team went into the woods to prepare an ambush while the others rested near their tents. Caroline didn't believe in their resolve, but Caleb thought the moment was opportune because of Eleanor's absence. The observer saw no point in stopping the boys, allowing events to develop. Ray acted as bait, leading Henry into the forest under the pretext of a dangerous beast. The proximity of the capital made the dragon's threat serious for local residents. Henry was unaware of Jeremy's impending attack at the appointed place. Jeremy unleashed a powerful explosive blessing, narrowly missing Ray, but effectively attacking Heinrich. The knight loudly scolded Jeremy, but he paid no attention, activating additional traps. Despite the blows, Henry stood firm thanks to the power of his blessing. Continuing to be indignant, the knight could not stop the determined Jeremy. The bully called his team, ready for battle, ordering them to kill Henry at any cost. At the last moment, the knight released a signal ball, creating a bright fireworks display. Seeing the signal, Caleb realized that Jeremy's plan had failed. The sentry soldiers noticed the distress signal, realizing that Henry was under attack. As the soldiers gathered to help, Caleb began methodically eliminating them one by one. Not understanding the betrayal, the knights received a cold explanation from the young man about the lack of personal motives. Henry's battle with Jeremy's team reached its peak intensity. Despite resisting everyone, it was Jeremy who became the main threat to the knight. After a surprise attack, Henry lost his arm, losing the ability to defend himself. Ray volunteered to check out the situation and stop any possible interference. Eleanor's sudden appearance made this pointless, surprising her with the strength of the candidates. At the camp, Caroline tied up the knights with her powers. Michael and his team arrived and were surprised by the girls' obedience to other people's orders. Caleb, who gave the order, praised Caroline and reported the elimination of the remaining fugitives. Caleb's ruthlessness shocked even Caroline, who was accustomed to his cruelty. The young man explained the elimination of the knights by the fact that Jeremy's team was busy fighting Henry. Sarah was surprised by the reality of the plan for rebellion, considering the previous conversations to be fiction. Michael did not believe that Caleb would support Jeremy's plan, but he explained his neutral position. The observer advised Michael to focus on stopping Jeremy as the more important task. Realizing the need, Michael decided to put off talking to Caleb and went to the battlefield. Henry apologized to Eleanor for the failure, acknowledging the effect of age on his strength. Jeremy, realizing the intensity of the situation, ordered the team to hold formation and follow the plan. The bully's comrades were doubtful of Eleanor's ability to control them. The saint explained the conditions of her control power, which weakened with the strength of the target. Eleanor claimed that even blessed heroes could not resist her miraculous power. Jeremy mockingly challenged the princess to fight without using control. Despite understanding the provocation, Eleanor agreed, wanting to show the candidates their place in the hierarchy of power. Henry, although he knew the princess's strength, was still worried about whether everything would be okay with her. But the princess reminded that she was a saint, and God loved her much more than all these children put together. Jeremy attacked, but Eleanor easily pushed him back with her earth attack, then began to attack with wind, fire, water, scattering everyone around. She thought that this had already broken their fighting spirit enough, but she was very wrong. Jeremy advised her not to consider herself a winner because even her strength has its weaknesses. At that moment, Michael appeared with his company, who called on Jeremy and the others to lay down their arms and stop fighting. But Jeremy didn't want to sit back like Michael did and offered to let him go if he wasn't ready to fight. The others were of the same opinion because they could no longer trust these people and were not going to listen to their orders. Sarah, to everyone's surprise, agreed with their opinion and suggested that they simply join in and help them win instead. Emilia was clearly against such a decision because she did not want to decide anything by brute force, and Michael could not decide to give the order. Seeing this, the princess explained that since they were also the instigators, she would not be able to forget everything they had done, and regardless of their decision, everyone would be punished. Then, using wind magic, she scattered all the students in the area, and the weakest of them even lost consciousness. Jeremy, although wounded, was still standing. Approaching Michael, he explained that Michael would not be able to protect anyone anyway, and that if he did not help now, sooner or later Eleanor would kill them all. Then Michael realized that there was no way out, and it seemed that this was what Sarah had been waiting for, having already prepared her flame for battle. Even Emilia, having come to her senses, joined this fight. Pleased with this spectacle, the princess decided to show the hero candidates why her existence was so valuable. Not far from the battle site were Caleb and Caroline. Caroline wasn't sure what they should do now, but Caleb decided to just stand there and watch until Eleanor finally used the enslavement technique. Henry was the first to enter the fray, protecting Eleanor from physical attacks. The princess appreciated his efforts and therefore helped him by returning his hand to its place. This upset the disciples who had spent so much effort to incapacitate him. Sarah understood that even though Henry had now become his old self, there were now more of them, and they also had more strength. The princess suggested not to waste time and start a fight, which would become a new test for the candidates, because if they could not defeat her, then they would also lose in the fight with the Demon King. Michael was the first to attack, with his allies covering his back. Henry realized that Michael's blessing was very strong, so soon he would not be able to block the candidates' attacks. Seeing this, Eleanor decided to help him using her ice magic. Sarah noticed this in time, and managed to melt most of the fragments with her fire magic, but she could not save him from the next blow. The fragments wounded Michael. Seeing this, Amelia became furious, because she was afraid that their leader could get hurt. She decided to help with telekinesis. Ray also joined her with his wind magic, and they began to attack Eleanor to distract her attention. But to her shock, right at her feet, all the magic dissipated and fell. It turned out that she had special protection, so the magic and blessings did not work on her. Caleb, who was nearby, saw that she had the ability Saint's Blessing, and although her defense indicators were low, she did not need special magical protection. Only a physical attack should have worked against her, but Henry protected her from physical attacks. At this time, Henry was busy with Jeremy, who began to attack with just physical blows without using the explosion, but even such attacks were very strong against the knight. Michael and Jeremy divided their responsibilities. While Jeremy distracted Henry, Michael had to fight the saint. His sword was completely useless against the girl. Then one of his classmates who had woken up threw him a regular sword, which he was able to fight with. The princess was even pleasantly surprised that Michael was determined to fight. But Michael knew that if it weren't for one person who believed in them, none of this would have happened. Then the fight gained new momentum. Seeing this battle, the others understood that their help would be completely useless here. Besides, they couldn't help Jeremy since he was fighting close, and any magical intervention could affect him as well. But Jeremy, even without the help of his classmates, fought against Henry quite skillfully and even managed to make fun of the old knight. Henry knew that the boy should not be so self-confident because he had already spent enough strength and could not even use his blessing. Michael's situation was more complicated because he had to dodge the magic and try to get closer, but to no avail. So, circling around the saint, he tried to find at least one way to defeat Eleanor. The princess praised Michael for holding his own against her for so long and even managing to dodge her attacks. But he didn't care. He was still coming up with tactics for his battle, and he understood that the only way out was to attack from close range, because the blessings didn't work on the saint. And Eleanor specialized in long-range attacks, so she could hit his friends. So he decided to reduce the distance between them at any cost, and at that moment his body glowed and his speed increased. And although this scared the princess very much, she managed to attack the guy with all the elements in time. Eventually the saint caused his body to burn, causing him to lose consciousness. Looking at Michael's body, the princess realized that the guy had been unknowingly strengthening his body with magic and was able to release everything outward for the attack. It was an incredible talent. However, he still couldn't match her, so he was defeated. Jeremy, meanwhile, was thinking about how he could defeat Henry if he could no longer use his explosion. Noticing his thoughts, Henry attacked and managed to seriously wound the guy, bringing him to his knees. Henry called Jeremy a non-entity who could do nothing without his blessing. Remembering his past and his reality, Jeremy knew it wasn't true. So he managed to get to his feet, and to Henry's shock, he launched an attack that he had not expected. He struck the old man in the face, knocking him unconscious. Michael, meanwhile, saw a vision, remembering his past with his classmates. He was finally able to come to his senses, realizing that he could not allow his loved ones to suffer. While the princess was amazed at his fortitude, Michael managed to get close to her in an instant and wounded her hand. Immediately after that, he approached again. This time, the princess already felt his presence and managed to attack with ice. She realized that while he was unconscious, he had received the blessing of speed. Therefore, he was also God's favorite, since he had been given such an ability. The reason was that Michael, while unconscious, asked God for the strength to help him protect his loved ones. And when it seemed that Eleanor's defeat was near, she activated control magic, because she knew that no one could resist this trump card. But this was exactly what Caleb was waiting for, so he suggested to Caroline that they begin to act on their plan. By this point, Eleanor had already tied up the rest of her classmates who tried to help Michael, so they stood frozen in horror as they looked at the princess. Then the saint turned around, looking at Henry, and admitted that she did not expect that anyone could defeat him. Even so, she would be able to find another knight to replace him, since any problem was solvable as long as the hero candidates were under her control. Ray realized that they had entered into a fight from the start with no chance of winning. Until they can handle this technique, they will not succeed. The saint explained that since she had performed the ritual of summoning the hero candidates, she could control them. Otherwise, their existence could become a threat to the world. But without waiting to hear the rest, Caleb attacked, and the princess barely managed to dodge. Noticing the guy, she was surprised that he decided to join the fight after hiding all this time, and on top of that, he killed all her servants. The hero seemed strange to the saint from the very beginning, since even after receiving a useless blessing, he did not react in any way. She expected him to have some hidden strength, but now she was greatly disappointed in him, as he should have thought twice before jumping into a fight he was initially losing. Caleb was sure that it was up to him to decide whether he was losing the fight or not, and the princess decided to prove him wrong. As soon as he moved, Eleanor immediately immobilized him with the magic of her influence. The saint smugly began to explain that as long as this technique existed, she remained invincible. But she didn't expect that at that moment Caleb would take out his gun and shoot her in the shoulder. Then the princess was horrified and began to scream, not understanding how the guy could move after using the enslavement technique. Without answering, he fired again, and the girl could not understand why her defense was not able to stop these blows. Caleb explained that he used one of the most deadly weapons from his world, but he used it very rarely because he had no ammo. Taking advantage of the moment, Eleanor decided to attack Caleb with fire, believing that he had let down his guard during his explanations. Imagine her surprise when she saw that only a burnt cloak was lying on the ground. The guy was behind her at the time and held the barrel of a gun to her head. He explained that while he was watching their fight, he realized that she was not strong in close-range combat, and the enslavement tactics did not work on him. Eleanor couldn't understand how he managed to get around her spell, but Caleb only smiled, although he admitted to himself that even he himself wasn't entirely sure whether his plan would work. When he called Caroline to come with him, he asked her to use the control technique on herself. The girl was very scared and embarrassed, but agreed to help. Caleb explained that while studying materials on enslavement techniques, he found several interesting facts. If two subjugation-type techniques are applied to one person, the one that was applied first takes precedence. Caroline then realized that if she exerted her control, the saint's enslavement technique would have no effect. But this was not the only way, because something similar could also be done if the technique surpassed Eleanor's divine protection. Caroline feared that her power would not compare to the enslavement technique in either scale or power. But Caleb knew that the main difference was most likely in the level of techniques, since Caroline was level 1 and Saint was level 3. Caroline thought that perhaps when casting, Eleanor's technique would be able to interrupt the spell due to its higher level. But it was unlikely, and the fight with Stefan had already proven it. Initially, the monsters obeyed Stefan, and Caleb thought it was because of his superior level. But then Caleb came to the conclusion that the whole thing was because the scientist had applied his technique first. So he assumed that Eleanor's enslavement technique would work on the same principles. In any case, they had no choice but to simply try it all out in practice. At this point, the princess finally realized that Caroline was the cause of the problem. Not wanting to drag things out, Caleb revealed that he had indeed been subjected to a control spell. Caleb warned Saint Eleanor that her end was coming. But instead of shooting her right away, the guy decided to handcuff the saint with handcuffs that he borrowed from a member of the Demon King's sect. He was pleased that they could also contain the miraculous power of the saint. Eleanor didn't understand what the guy was going to do with her, but he offered to let her go alive and unharmed if she immediately returned them to their real world. But it turned out that the girl was not able to do this, because in order to send them back, a completely different technique was needed. After analyzing her abilities, Caleb realized that this was very likely true. Caleb decided to clarify why the saint had previously claimed that they would return home after defeating the Demon King. It turned out that calling people from another world required enormous amounts of miraculous power, so they turned to God himself. So she assumed that their presence here was God's will, and when God's will was done, they would most likely return back, but she didn't know that for sure. Seeing this, Caleb asked what happened to the previous candidates. Apparently, almost everyone was killed by the Demon King's army. The survivors most likely remained, but were currently hiding somewhere. It then became obvious to everyone why Eleanor had not told them about this fact right away. If they knew about this right away, no one would agree to participate in the fight against the Demon King. But the princess knew that they had no other choice, because if they decided to settle in this world, sooner or later the Demon King's army would attack again. If they wanted to survive, they needed the country's support, so Eleanor offered to let them forget about the incident if they let her go. But Caleb was not so naive, so he wanted to kill the girl. Apparently, Michael decided to stop him, and Caleb thought it was stupid and too naive a decision. Michael admitted that he initially entered the fight hoping to return home, but if the saint was unable to do so, he would prefer to maintain his status as a hero candidate. The saint, taking advantage of the moment, also admitted her guilt and apologized for her rudeness, promising to change if they decided to spare her. But Caleb knew how dangerous this girl was, and next time he wouldn't catch her by surprise. Besides, he knew that all Eleanor had to do to avoid being attacked again was kill Caroline, and that was probably what she would do once she was released. Michael warned that they would not be able to escape punishment for killing the saint, so he offered to take an oath from Eleanor and leave her alive. The rest of the classmates agreed with this, because if they became wanted criminals, then they could forget about returning home. Even the militant Sarah agreed to this, because she was sure that they would find a way to make Eleanor keep her promise. But there were also those who still didn't trust Eleanor, who had nearly killed several of them during that battle. Michael agreed with Ray, but with Eleanor killed, they had no chance of survival. Caleb also understood that the whole class was obviously worried, but Caleb himself would be able to survive, unlike the others, so he quickly made the right decision. He took a pistol from his inside pocket and shot Eleanor in the forehead. While everyone was screaming in horror, not believing what had happened, Caleb took out a smoke bomb and fled the scene of the crime. Emily and the others were indignant because Caleb didn't even wait for their decision, and again acted very selfishly. But there were also those who were grateful to Caleb for his determination and steadfastness. Caroline just looked at the saint's body in horror and realized that everything had happened exactly as Caleb had predicted. As they watched the battle, the hero explained that their main goal was to capture Eleanor and learn how to return to their world. But if it turned out that she was not capable of doing this, Caleb was ready to kill her. But he also knew that most likely, if they couldn't return to their world, Michael would still protect Eleanor, so he decided to kill her and run away. Caroline realized that Caleb was going to take the blame for the riot. This is precisely why Caleb had previously allowed several soldiers to escape, so that he could create the impression that he himself had created the riot and killed the saint. Everyone else would escape punishment, but if not, Caleb recommended that Caroline use her powers of control to ensure that the negotiations went more smoothly. Caroline wondered what Caleb himself would do during this time, but he only promised that he would be fine and that there was no need to worry about him. Now, looking at the sky, the girl wondered which way he was heading and what he planned to do next. At this time, a reporter came to the Heavenly King of the Demon Army, telling them that their attempts to kill the candidates had been unsuccessful. The general understood that there was no need to worry about this, because sooner or later the candidates for heroes would come to them, and then they would deal with them. Moreover, they were just children who could be easily trampled. It had been 2 days since Caleb had escaped. According to the map, he should have found a town nearby. He climbed the nearest mountain to finally get a better look at the area and realized that it was about half a day's journey to the city. By evening, he reached the city, but he understood that they would not let him through the main gates because he was the murderer of a saint. So he decided to take a detour, using a hook and rope to climb up the wall. Once in the city, the first thing the guy thought about was that he needed to get some money as soon as possible, because despite the fact that he had borrowed a little from the dead soldiers, it would not last him long. As he walked around the city, Thor quickly noticed a bar, which was the best place to gather information. It was noisy there, but ignoring the people, he walked over and ordered ale and something to eat. The local immediately realized that the guy was not a local, and Caleb said that he had run away from his hometown and was now thinking about how to make a living. The man thought that Caleb's homeland was destroyed by an army of demons, but this legend suited Caleb the most, so he agreed and asked where he could be hired without documents. It turned out that the Adventurers Guild, which usually issued requests, most often related to the destruction of monsters, would be ideal for such cases. Besides, the guy who was traveling alone was clearly strong enough to handle it. Caleb started asking questions, and the tavern owner told him that he needed to register with the guild in the center of town. Besides, they are always short of free hands, so they don't pick on candidates and documents. The owner knew so much because he himself used to be an adventurer, but he was shot in the knee on a mission, which ended his career. After eating and sleeping well, Caleb decided to get ready to head to the guild. He went down to the reception desk and paid for his stay, and also warned that he would stay for a while longer. Leaving the hotel, he was surprised that no one reacted to his face, and he realized that he could act much more calmly, since the local portraits clearly would not accurately convey his appearance. Caleb soon reached the Adventurers Guild, where he immediately spotted the reception desk. He approached, paid the registration fee of 1 silver coin, and began the registration. To do this, he had to state his age, name, and origin. Introducing himself under a fake name, he explained that his hometown had been destroyed by the Demon King's army. Having written all this down, the girl reported the end of the registration procedure. When the seals were placed, she told him about the adventurers' activities. Each adventurer was assigned a rank based on their achievements and abilities. The higher the rank, the higher the rewards, and the more difficult the requests. As a newbie, he was an F rank and had to complete requests to earn reputation in order to increase his rank. She pointed him to the request desk, and upon walking over there, Caleb realized that most of the quests involved gathering herbs and killing kobolds. He had never seen such monsters before, so he decided to read the task and take this request. But suddenly, seasoned adventurers appeared and began to dissuade him and even mock him for such a decision, because the kobolds would quickly kill such a weak guy. Despite Caleb's advice that the adventurers leave him alone, she became even more angry. Words like these led to a scuffle, and everyone watching realized that this new guy would have a hard time in the guild. But after the first attack, Caleb was able to press on the sore spot of one of the guys. When Caleb was attacked by his comrades, he was able to defeat them all at once, after which he calmly left to carry out his mission. Though thinking about this fight, he was shocked that the mid-level adventurers were weaker than even the weakest hero candidate. After that, he immediately headed into the forest to search for the kobold base, but he never found anyone. Finally, seeing the first fresh tracks, he decided to go in that direction, but the kobolds were obviously well hidden, so he did not find anyone for a long time. Soon, turning around, he realized that a kobold, armed with a stolen human weapon, had crept up on him from behind, and another one had come up behind him. Caleb quickly blinded one by throwing dirt into his eyes, after which I also easily dealt with both at once. After reading their abilities, he realized that their defense and attack skills were weak enough that it wasn't that hard to deal with them. He decided to find a few more to earn more money. Returning to the Adventurers Guild, he presented the kobold ears as proof of completing the quest. Looking at the whole pile of ears, the girl was in shock and did not believe that he was able to kill them all. In fact, Caleb had more problems finding the kobolds than killing them, because he had enough combat skills. But his reconnaissance of the territory suffered. The girl even thought that Caleb might have registered with the Adventurers Guild before, because he was unusually effective for a newbie. But having made sure that he was a newcomer, she went to bring him his reward. Finally leaving the building, he already became the owner of a whole bag of coins, and decided that he would most likely settle in this city as an adventurer, in order to earn even more, and find useful information about this world. But suddenly his path was blocked by a rather strong adventurer. The man introduced himself as Light, a B-rank adventurer who handles the internal affairs of all the adventurers in the city. It turned out that he came to deal with the guy who beat up his adventurer friends. Caleb tried to explain that those guys attacked him first, but Light didn't want to listen to that, so he went on the attack. Caleb easily blocked the blows and knocked the man to the ground. But even after this, he did not give up his attempts and began to attack again. Caleb then explained that Light's main mistake was that his technique was too obvious and there were too many open areas to attack. Light realized that his opponent was very strong, so he did not understand why he, having arrived at the guild, began to offend the weak. And Caleb decided to tell him how everything really was. Already in the tavern, he finished his story, and Light apologized for not believing him from the very beginning. After this, he turned to his comrades and scolded them for their deception, ordering them to think about their behavior, and the men immediately began to ask Caleb for forgiveness. But he didn't hold a grudge against them. Instead, he decided to ask a few questions. Wanting to make amends, Light agreed to answer everything he knew. Then Caleb revealed that he became an adventurer to save money. But there was another reason he was looking for a way to move to another world. The adventurers began to look at each other enthusiastically, discussing how they could get to another world. Even though Light clearly understood that this required special equipment, he did not know where to get it. But after thinking a little, he remembered the existence of one knowledgeable person. This is the sage Albana, an elf who is also an advisor to the king. Caleb had heard of him, but doubted that he was real, since he had only read about the sage in books. Elves are also long-lived, living deep in the forests. There are so few of them left that they have become almost a legend, although according to rumors, they could sometimes be found in villages. The sage was one of these elves. Light knew that the sage had been alive for over 100 years and knew a lot. In addition, he was a talented magician. Elves are unique in that they use the power of the spirit to cast magic, so Caleb felt that even if the elf didn't know the technique of returning, his magic could bring him back. But the adventurers themselves doubted that this elf was still alive, since no one had seen him for a long time, and no one had heard of him. They apologized for not being able to help him with anything useful, but Caleb had had enough information, so he thanked the guys and was about to leave. But the adventurers were curious about why he needed to move to another world, and the guy suggested that they figure it out for themselves. So a week passed in this city, and he finally took another reward for the order. Leaving the guild, he met his now comrades, who invited him to rest with them, but Caleb was too busy. He finally gathered information about the sage who was the king's advisor 10 years ago, but retired and moved to the western border. It was near the hot spot of the fight against the Demon King's army. Now that Caleb had no more reasons to stay in the city, he decided to visit the sage, hoping to find answers to his questions, and perhaps a way to return home. In the ancient city of Alpha, the hero candidates were engaged in a lively conversation with Geralt, the fearless commander of the 8th detachment of the Order of the Holy Knights. It has been a whole month since Michael took over the responsibility of training the future defenders of the world, replacing the saint. Geralt, with genuine concern, inquired about the candidates' well-being. To his relief, Michael assured the commander that he was showing exceptional kindness and care towards them. The warrior couldn't hide his smile when he heard these words. For him, each of the hero candidates was a priceless treasure, and Geralt firmly believed that these young men deserved the deepest respect from everyone around them. Emily sincerely thanked Geralt for his concern, but deep down she still doubted the warrior's honesty. The atmosphere in the room changed as the night got to the main topic. The Order had decided it was time for the candidates to prove themselves in real combat. Michael, feeling his heartbeat quicken, realized that they were being prepared to be sent into the thick of battle. Geralt, noticing the confusion on the heroes' faces, continued his explanation with a note of sympathy in his voice. The knight reported that there was fierce fighting along the western border, and they would be sent to one of the hottest spots on the front. The leader of the heroes, having gathered his courage, agreed, but put forward a condition: not to take those who had not yet mastered sufficient combat skills. Geralt, respecting Michael's decision, agreed and promised to find other important work for the unprepared candidates away from the front. The young man breathed a sigh of relief, remembering his injured comrades and hoping that safe work would help them recover. The knight, feeling pressed for time, asked the candidates to be ready to set out at dawn and prepare for a long journey. Emilia, leaving the room, could not help but smile happily, feeling that they had begun to be treated better after recent events. Michael knew she was referring to the tragedy of the saint's murder and Caleb's disappearance, which cast a shadow on all the candidates. The heroes and knights came to the priest to report the death of the saint. The old man could not believe what he heard. Sarah revealed that the killer was Caleb, who had betrayed them and gone into hiding after his terrible act. The girl added that all their attempts to find the traitor were unsuccessful. The priest listened with doubt. The story seemed too convenient, and he suspected a possible conspiracy between the candidates. The old man wondered if the heroes were trying to hide a more terrible truth with their story. A guard suddenly burst in and reported that he saw two candidates trying to protect the saint, but were unable to stop Caleb. Eleanor's knights confirmed the guard's words, and the priest felt relieved, but a new fear settled in his heart. The old man wondered how strong Caleb was if he could defeat the saint and the other candidates. Michael, noticing the priest's concern, explained that the traitor was not only strong, but also knew how to hide his true intentions. The elderly man, realizing the seriousness of the situation, decided to discuss it in a more secluded place. The leader of the heroes noticed how skillfully Caroline led the knights, guiding their actions and words. The young man mentally thanked the girl for her resourcefulness, which helped them avoid exposure. Emilia, seeing Michael's concern, tried to convince him not to worry about the traitor Caleb. The leader nodded, but deep down he felt guilty, knowing that he had forced Caleb to take on the role of a traitor in order to protect the others. Later, Michael told the group the news of being sent to the front lines, causing a stir among his comrades. Sarah reminded those worried that they had chosen to join the combat group and there was no turning back. The leader, trying to encourage the team, explained that Geralt would be their commander at the front. Caroline approached the group, anxiously asking for news about Caleb. Michael reported no leads, despite the bounty on the traitor's head and the resources thrown into the search. Sarah, noticing Caroline's reaction, promised to incinerate Caleb if he crossed her path. The girl shrugged, her eyes showing regret for her failed escape with Caleb. After several days of travel, the exhausted candidates began to grumble about the lack of rest stops. Jeremy suddenly silenced everyone, his heightened senses picking up the presence of monsters nearby. The heroes prepared for battle when a soldier approached them, displeased with the sudden stop. Michael tried to explain the situation, but the soldier did not take them seriously, resenting the violation of orders. Jeremy, enraged, grabbed the soldier by the neck, defiantly asking why they should obey someone like him. The conflict was interrupted when the young man heard the monsters approaching. The soldiers entered the battle, but their ordinary weapons proved ineffective against the powerful claws of the monsters. Jeremy, forgetting about his anger, rushed to help the warriors, saving even the recent offender. After the young man's particularly powerful attack, everyone could appreciate how much his fighting skills had grown. However, the young man himself was dissatisfied with himself. The words were ringing in his head: "If I remain this weak, I will never reach Caleb's level." The moment he saw how easily Caleb dealt with Eleanor was forever imprinted in his memory. Jeremy realized how far behind his classmate he was. Even in school, Jeremy constantly tried to put Caleb in his place, but Caleb always looked at him with his cold-blooded gaze, as if he saw right through Jeremy. When Jeremy received the power of the explosion, he thought he had finally managed to surpass Caleb, but the reality turned out to be completely different. Michael noticed that Jeremy had always been in a bad mood lately, but the young man did not want to share his thoughts, and only suggested that everyone continue on their way. Soon the detachment reached the western border of the Holy Country. Here they met the current commander, a young woman named Emilia, who led the 4th detachment of the front city. Geralt was surprised to see Emilia because he remembered another commander in this post. Emilia, noticing his surprise, explained that the past commander had died a week ago, so they were in dire need of help now. At that moment, a frightened soldier ran up to Emilia, out of breath from running fast, who reported a sudden attack of monsters. Emilia, without wasting a second, turned to the arriving heroes and asked them for help. Michael, realizing the seriousness of the situation, gathered his team and ordered them to prepare for battle to help save as many soldiers as possible. Michael noticed how Jeremy's eyes lit up, eager to improve his abilities in real combat. Coming out onto the fortress wall, the heroes saw an advancing army of demons. Its size terrified even the bravest. Geralt, quickly assessing the situation, gave the order to open fire. The sky filled with fiery arrows that rained down on the approaching demons. Despite numerous losses, the army of darkness continued its advance. Amelia, appearing next to Michael, warned that these creatures should not be underestimated. They are much more resilient than they appear. And she ordered to follow Geralt's instructions, since he was their leader. Amelia herself went down with her team. But before Amelia could finish, Michael and the others noticed that part of their group had already gone down. It was Jeremy and his team, rushing into the thick of the battle and hoping that these demons could entertain him. Suddenly, a group of demons broke through the defenses and began to make their way through the walls. Michael, acting with lightning speed, managed to save many lives, and the demons, seeing the candidates for heroes, concentrated their attack on them. In this fight, Michael also tried out a new ability to control the sword. By stretching it enough, he could easily kill enemies around the perimeter. Michael, inspiring his comrades, asked them not to be afraid to challenge the demons, because while they were together, the demons were no match for them. His words lit a fire in the hearts of his classmates. Michael realized that as long as he remained brave, he would motivate everyone else. Caleb had taught him this, and now he never allowed himself to give in to naive thoughts. Amelia and the others also joined the fight, not wanting to leave their leader alone. Finally, the first significant results began to appear. Geralt, seeing the success of the young heroes, ordered them to continue the onslaught to force the demons to retreat. He himself, without hesitation, jumped off the wall to join the battle on the ground. When the battle with the demons was finally over, the exhausted heroes were able to catch their breath. Amelia, appearing among them, solemnly announced the victory over the horde of monsters and their shameful retreat. Michael, reflecting on this battle, knew that he still had a lot of work to do, as it was difficult for him to fight a crowd of enemies and lead a group at the same time. But Geralt, approaching the young man, praised him for his excellent leadership in battle. However, the commander also warned that the demons they were fighting were only of the lower and middle class. There were also more powerful creatures whose strength was truly terrifying. While the heroes celebrated their victory, the mood in the gloomy castle of the Demon King was quite different. Stongai, one of the king's confidants, was clearly indignant at the defeat of his wards. By this time, Caleb had finally reached the western borders of the Holy Country. He was in the Great Forest, and he knew that the exit from this green thicket was very close. This meant that he had almost reached his goal to find the Great Sage. But suddenly, demonic creatures with long, writhing tongues attacked him from the bushes. They moved at incredible speed, but Caleb reacted quickly. After reading their characteristics, he instantly analyzed their fighting style and chose the optimal strategy. However, even the experienced Caleb underestimated his opponents. He let them get too close, which almost cost him his life. He eventually won, but the fight taught him a valuable lesson. Caleb realized that as he progressed, the monsters were becoming stronger and more dangerous. Perhaps it was because he was getting closer to the Demon King's lands, or because there were no cities with adventurers in those areas that could keep the monster population under control. In any case, this did not surprise Caleb. In such wild places, only the strongest individuals survived, and the absence of hunters allowed the monsters to develop unhindered. Caleb decided to be even more careful and attentive. By the end of the day, he had reached the foot of Mount Urcano, a natural barrier protecting the country from a full-scale invasion by the Demon King's army. The highest peak of this mountain range bore the ominous name of Death Wolf Mountain. According to rumors, it was on its summit that the elf sage Caleb was looking for lived. Knowing that there must be a village at the foot of the mountain, Caleb decided to go down to find a place to spend the night. However, what he saw made his heart clench with horror. The village was burned to the ground. Approaching cautiously, he witnessed a horrific scene. An army of demons was dealing with the surviving inhabitants they had found. Having completed their dark deed, the demons turned to their commander, a higher demon named Hector, asking for further instructions. Hector ordered to leave some of the people alive, as they would be useful to them as slaves, after which he began to interrogate the demons about the location of the elf. The information received confirmed the elf's presence on the summit of Death Wolf Mountain, and Hector announced a march the next morning to capture him. The demon commander noticed the concern of his subordinates over the deadly wolves on the mountain, which were uncontrollable and difficult to destroy. One of the demons lamented the lack of heavenly kings capable of taming even dragons, which would make their task much easier. Hector abruptly cut off the panicked talk, ordering the wolves to be killed if they could not be tamed, emphasizing the need to carry out the order. Caleb, watching what was happening, was amazed at the level of organization in the ranks of the demons and their discipline. The youth activated his appraisal ability and was surprised to find that Hector belonged to a rare race of higher demons that were few in number in the army. The demon commander, sensing someone's presence, gave orders to his soldiers to pursue the discovered spy. Caleb managed to escape thanks to his stealth skills, but as he left the destroyed village, he saw the locals tied up. The traveler abandoned the idea of rescuing the captives, realizing that his main goal coincided with the goal of the demons, to find the sage. Late at night, Caleb began climbing the mountain, guided only by animal tracks due to the lack of beaten paths. The young man encountered difficulties. Poor visibility and slippery ground made rapid progress impossible. Suddenly, Caleb felt the presence of the deadly wolves the demons had spoken of, feeling them trying to surround him. The traveler realized that with every step the wolves became more numerous, and soon their long howls could be heard in the night sky. At the moment of the pack's attack, Caleb managed to jump onto a high tree branch, avoiding the first attack of the predators. The young man, having assessed the situation, understood why many who had risked climbing this mountain did not return. Suddenly, one of the wolves struck the tree trunk with incredible force, splitting it and forcing Caleb to look for new shelter. The traveler, falling, used a new skill. Having imbued the leaf with miraculous power, he threw it at the wolf, cutting the monster in half. Upon landing, Caleb strengthened his body with mana, allowing him to quickly dispatch the remaining wolves. The young man realized the effectiveness of using mana to increase physical strength in combat with dangerous opponents. Caleb learned this technique during his fight with Eleanor, who used miraculous power to enhance her physical abilities. The traveler decided to master this technique to perfection in order to improve his combat performance and resist magical attacks. Caleb knew that this method was not as impressive as a real blessing, but he was confident in its effectiveness. The young man continued his journey to the top of the mountain, simultaneously training his miraculous power for future battles. Soon the traveler had to fight the leader of the wolf pack, but he dealt with this enemy just as easily. Caleb expected that after the death of the leader the remaining wolves would scatter, but he noticed their strange activity. The young man suddenly realized that he could now anticipate the movements of his opponents, having become convinced of this after killing another wolf. Caleb, engrossed in training his new ability, began chasing the frightened wolves as they tried to escape. After the battle ended, the traveler discovered a new skill in his characteristics that allowed him to foresee the future. The young man realized that because of the basic blessing of evaluation, all his future skills would be related to analysis and foresight. After several hours of grueling climbing, Caleb decided to take a break and continue climbing at first light. The traveler's plans were not destined to come true due to a sudden noise from below, indicating the proximity of an army of demons. At the foot of Deathwolf Mountain, Hector, the commander of the demons, gathered his army for the decisive battle. The demons' enemy turned out to be a young elf, a student of the sage whom both Caleb and Hector's army were looking for. The commander, seeing that victory was near, gave the order to attack, but an unexpected event changed the course of the battle. A man appeared out of nowhere. It was Caleb, and he came down the mountain just in time to intervene in the battle. Caleb quickly lowered the elf to the ground and assessed the situation. There were about a dozen ordinary demons in front of him, one higher demon, their commander. Covering the girl with himself, he explained that he needed her to meet with the sage. After quickly scanning her abilities, Caleb learned that she was half-elf and had magical powers. Hector, without changing his plan, ordered everyone to attack, even despite the appearance of a new enemy. Caleb knew he had to save the elf to win the sage's favor, since he had to defeat all these demons. The fight turned out to be surprisingly easy thanks to his ability to foresee. Caleb skillfully dodged attacks and delivered precise counterattacks, not allowing his opponents to touch him. However, he didn't know how long the effect of this blessing would last and how much time he had left. Hector, realizing the danger of the enemy in close combat, ordered the demons to attack with magic. Caleb was already prepared for the worst, but the elf reacted in time, dispelling the magic with her air spirit. This secret technique, only available to elves, surprised even Caleb. Maya, as the elf was called, explained that thanks to Caleb's help, her spirits were able to regain their strength for the attack. By this point, the demon commander, enraged by the progress of the battle, decided to personally deal with Caleb, instructing the others to attack the elf. Caleb asked the girl to deal with the weaker demons while he dealt with their commander. Having received Maya's consent, he immediately rushed at Hector. The greater demon managed to repel Caleb's attack, but even he was impressed by the young hero's strength. Despite his skill, Caleb still took a few hits from Hector, and at that moment, he fully realized how powerful the greater demons were. Hector even felt some pity for Caleb, realizing that if he were not human, he would have a much better chance of winning. After analyzing the opponent's abilities, Caleb realized that Hector's physical characteristics were at an incredibly high level. Even with foresight, a frontal attack was too dangerous. Caleb decided to resort to trickery. Hector, not giving Caleb a break, continued to attack, and despite the ability to anticipate the trajectory of the blows, Caleb barely had time to dodge. His body was too weak compared to the demon. However, he took advantage of Hector's momentary inattention to fire several bullets at him, aiming straight for the heart. Hector managed to dodge, but his legs were injured, slowing his movements. Caleb tried to take advantage of this again, but the demon was prepared for this turn of events. Realizing that he was out of ammo and had no other choice, Caleb decided to take a desperate step. He threw a grenade at Hector. The explosion engulfed the demon in flames. His minions rushed to help, but Maya's magic stopped them. The elf was amazed that a simple human could fight on equal terms with a higher demon. However, Caleb understood that victory was still far away. He had no more ammo or grenades, and what he had already used was clearly not enough to defeat the greater demon. Hector, enraged by the enemy's strange weapon, began to attack with full force. Caleb barely had time to dodge. Realizing that he had one last chance, Caleb activated his weakness display skill. Noticing a weak spot on the demon's neck, he managed to deliver the decisive blow, slitting Hector's throat. The demon, bleeding, fell to the ground. The combination of foresight and weakness mapping was incredibly effective, but the strain on Caleb's body was enormous. Immediately after the victory, the exhausted hero fell to his knees, unable to rise. Seeing the defeat of their commander, the demons, without grieving for long, decided to take revenge by attacking the exhausted Caleb. Maya, although she was exhausted and her spirits were tired, wanted to help the man who saved her life. Suddenly, a familiar voice was heard, ordering the huge salamander to burn all the demons. Turning around, Maya saw her mentor, the very same elf sage that Caleb was looking for. The sage, seeing the wounded Caleb, thanked him for saving her student. She introduced herself, jokingly adding that now she resembled less a great sage and more a pile of old bones that had retired. Although Caleb couldn't use his appraisal ability, he could tell just how strong the elf was just by looking at her. In his current state, he couldn't even dream of being able to stand up to her. Caleb decided to be honest in his intentions. The elf sage herself guessed that the young man had come to such a wilderness for a reason. She agreed to help him in gratitude for saving the student. Maya suggested continuing the conversation in their house, away from the blood-soaked battlefield, as she feared that predatory wolves might soon come running there, attracted by the smell. Looking at the elves walking ahead, Caleb realized that his risk had paid off. Now the sage was much more favorably disposed towards him. Finally, they came to the house located on the top of the mountain. Along the way, Caleb was surprised by the elf's choice of place of residence. She explained that she was tired of the worldly bustle. Even after leaving her post, many people sought her out to use her in their plans. Only the most talented, like Caleb, could reach her new refuge. But the sage was not a monster. Anyone who could conquer this mountain would be warmly welcomed into her home. Over a cup of tea, the elf asked Caleb about his wishes. He admitted that he was looking for a way to return to his homeworld, from where he was summoned as a hero candidate to destroy the Demon King. The sage was not surprised by these words. She had already heard about the summoning of the third generation of hero candidates. Caleb was only slightly surprised because the saint spoke about heroes, but he did not know that they were the third call. It turned out that the second call-up was carried out 5 years ago, and the first attempt took place 10 years ago. Both generations were completely defeated by the Demon King's army. After imposing a taboo on the summoning of heroes, Saint Eleanor decided to make a third attempt, despite the sage's opinion about the stupidity of entrusting the fate of the country to strangers. Caleb admitted that he killed Saint Eleanor to prevent further summonings of people from other worlds, agreeing with the sage's point of view. The elf was amused that the saint was killed by her own pawn, and she considered it karma. The sage informed Caleb that it was impossible to send him back home with her magic, which greatly disappointed the young man. The elf explained the lack of technology for returning heroes and people's lack of interest in this matter. The traveler remembered Eleanor's words and realized that the only way out was to perhaps defeat the Demon King. The sage suspected that among the demon's magical techniques there might be a suitable way to return Caleb home. The elf, feeling indebted, promised to think of a way to help Caleb, despite the lack of information. Looking at the young man, the sage thought that he had every chance of defeating the Demon King. Caleb was reluctant to take on the task, but admitted that he would kill the Demon King if there was no other way. The elf, hearing the serious tone of the young man, understood its unusualness and felt the cold emptiness growing within him. The traveler thanked the sage for his help and asked him to pass on information through the Adventurers Guild if necessary. Looking at Caleb leaving, the elf tried to understand whether she could trust such a strange young man. Maya interrupted the sage's thoughts by advising Caleb to take a shower after the grueling climb and battle with demons. The young man wanted to agree, but the sage surprised him with an unexpected proposal. The elf suggested that Caleb take Maya on the journey, believing that the student would help him achieve his goal faster. The traveler explained to the sage his reluctance to take his noisy companion with him, although Maya herself was opposed to the idea. Despite the objections, their journey together to the eastern regions of the Demon Kingdom thus began. Caleb was amazed by the good weather in the demon lands, and Maya explained that these territories used to belong to the Holy Kingdom. The elf said that before the occupation, on the western slope of the mountain, there was a large city surrounded by villages. The travelers were heading towards a former city that had now become a military base under the control of the Demon King's army. Caleb inquired about the fate of the locals who inhabited these lands before the demon invasion. Maya spoke sadly of the death of half the inhabitants, the enslavement of others, and the escape of the lucky few through the mountains. The young man realized that the idea of taking a girl with extensive knowledge about this world with him was not such a bad one. The traveler explained to the sage the reasons for his initial refusal, which clearly angered Maya, who was not eager to travel. The elf sage advised Caleb not to be frivolous, emphasizing that he could learn a lot from the knowledgeable Maya. The young man did not understand the benefit for the girl from traveling with him, considering it pointless for her. The reason was Maya's youth, which had extensive theoretical knowledge but no practical experience. The sage had long planned to send Maya on a journey, but was worried about her safety, and Caleb became the perfect companion for the elf. The hero asked why the sage herself could not go on a journey with Maya. The elf explained that she was no longer able to endure long journeys. Although she looked young from a human perspective, her strength was waning. After hearing this explanation, even Maya was no longer so categorically opposed to this idea. However, Caleb still asked if she was afraid of the dangers that would await them in the Demon Kingdom. Seeing Maya's doubts, the sage reminded her of the prospects of the journey, which would help her become much stronger. Hearing about this, the young elf did not think long and agreed to go on the journey with Caleb. However, after just a day of travel, it became obvious how weak Maya really was. Despite her diligent training, she still had low stamina, as she was a mage and not a warrior. Eventually, Caleb had no choice but to make a stop to let Maya rest. The elf was surprised by this decision, because earlier Caleb swore that he would leave her if she interfered with the journey. Caleb explained that if he really wanted to leave her, he simply wouldn't have taken her in the first place. He advised Maya not to think about stupid things and to hurry up with setting up the tent. By the time they had finished setting up camp, night had already fallen. After making a fire, the travelers decided to have dinner before going to bed. At this point, Caleb decided to have a serious talk with Maya. He warned the elf that he was ready to risk even his own life to achieve his goal. However, Maya had no such reasons, so he was interested in what caused her desire to go with him. Maya shared that she initially wondered how to tell Caleb about her motivation, but was glad that he initiated the conversation. The gist of her story was that she was born in an elven village that was destroyed by the Demon King's army. The demons, whose essence was the embodiment of chaos, swept away everything in their path without distinguishing who to kill. As a result, Maya's parents and younger brother died at the hands of the demons. The girl survived only thanks to the self-sacrifice of her father, who distracted the demons onto himself. At that moment, she could only helplessly watch the death of her loved ones. After the demon army left, Maya, left alone, was doomed to die in the forest. However, she was found and raised by a mentor. This meeting determined the fate of the girl. She decided to become a magician. Maya accepted the mentor's offer because she was driven by the desire to gain power that could destroy demons. Every moment of that terrible night, imprinted in her memory, forced her to absorb all the knowledge that her mentor gave her and to train tirelessly for the sake of her revenge. The girl was ready to destroy with her own hands all those who took her family away. She even knew the names of her enemies. The first was Windberg, one of the 4 heavenly kings of the Demon King's army, known as the Wind King. Caleb knew that Maya had come with him on this journey in hopes of finding a trace of this demon. However, he had no compelling reason to openly oppose the demons now. This suited Maya even better, since before the mentor categorically refused to let her go anywhere, but allowed her to go with Caleb. The girl did not understand the real reason, but the mentor probably had her own thoughts on this matter. Maya suggested that Caleb travel together quietly for a while, and then if necessary, they could discuss further plans. Remembering their conversation before leaving, Caleb understood the meaning of the mentor's words about Maya's wayward nature and her belief that he could pacify the girl. Now it became clear to him why these words were said, because if Maya had traveled alone, she would certainly have died in search of revenge. Seeing the elf's seriousness, Caleb listened to her explanation that she was not going to drag him into her problems and wanted to handle everything on her own. It sounded dubious, considering the elf's powers, but Caleb decided to end the conversation and go to bed, since he had to get up early in the morning. That night, when Maya was already asleep, Caleb left the tent to think about the future. He knew that any of the 4 heavenly kings of the Demon King's army would be far stronger than the demon he had fought with just now. Therefore, he needed to become much stronger and in the shortest possible time. And although he had no reason to worry about it much yet, he felt that he would need this power very soon. At this time, on the western border of the Holy Kingdom, opinions were divided. Karl insisted that it was time to go on the attack. Many, although they understood his point of view, refused this idea, since they were not given a concrete plan. The final decision belonged to Amelia, who proposed to attack the fort of Aris, which had previously belonged to humans. She sought to retake it, as it was an important strategic point for the enemy. Gerald tried to convey that this operation would be too dangerous. Until now they had only been on the defensive, and a sudden attack seemed unwise to him. Carl just chuckled, stating that the captain of the 8th squad was scared and ordered him to control himself, since he was the one in charge of the hero candidates. Finally, Amelia made her final decision. She believed that by now the enemy should have let down their guard and was not expecting their attack. So she turned to Michael, who was just waiting for the order from the leader of the 4th squad to go into battle. The decision was made. The operation was scheduled for the next day. Although Gerald still felt that Amelia was rushing things too much, he hoped that everything would be fine. Even though everyone looked confident, Amelia knew the plan seemed too risky. Michael tried to convince Emily that the best solution would indeed be to attack now while the enemy was recovering. But Gerald knew that everyone around him was relying too much on the strength of the hero candidates right now, which was why they were so insistent on attacking. In the end, they had no other choice. Gerald promised that he and his squad would support the candidates with all their might, but the main striking force was still in the combat squad. He agreed, although anxiety was building up inside him, but he had no choice, since they could not refuse to carry out the order. At dawn, the entire battle group began its attack. They left with the first rays of the sun, since the demons saw well at night, and attacking at night would be reckless. Mentally rehearsing the plan, Michael ordered the strike team to concentrate on eliminating the local leader while the main force was distracted. At this point, a knight approached Gerald, warning him that they needed to begin their operation. Finally, the team of candidates moved into battle. At this time, the 4th squad was already distracting the demons outside. In this way, the hero candidates were able to sneak inside the tower unnoticed and quickly cleared their way by killing low-level demons. Although everything was easy for Michael so far, Gerald advised them not to let their guard down, as their leader would be much stronger than the average demon. But at that moment, the candidates were surrounded on all sides, and so Gerald decided to cover them and ordered his detachment to go on the offensive. At this time, the hero candidates began to make their way forward, getting closer and closer to the leader. When they finally reached the next hall, the gates in front of them opened and they saw the main enemy. Stongai introduced himself as the Earth King, one of the 4 heavenly kings of the Demon King's army. Looking at him, Michael clearly understood that this was not just a status. An incredibly strong pressure was emanating from this demon. The King of Earth, noticing the fear on the heroes' faces, suggested that they fight so that they could reveal their full power. Michael was very nervous, but he knew that if they lost now, they would let down everyone involved in the operation, so he forced himself to calm down with all his might. But they clearly underestimated the enemy. After the first attacks, Michael was thrown back several meters because he needed time to recover. He was replaced by Jeremy, who decided to use his explosion. But even from such a close attack, the Earth King managed to defend himself and even counterattacked. Looking at the heroes, the demon laughed, realizing that the current hero candidates were not capable of anything at all. After which he decided to use his magical ability, and stone golems began to appear from the ground. The golems moved quite slowly, so the mages decided to attack them. Magic attacks were indeed effective against these golems, but the difficulty was that after each attack they were restored and gathered again. Lesser mages and fighters could get hurt, so Caroline tried her best to stop these golems in order to save her classmates. Looking at this terrible picture of the battle, Michael and Jeremy realized that they had no chance. They urgently needed to change their strategy. Ray then said that the only way to defeat the golems would likely be to kill the mage who created them. He decided to have a team of mages deal with the stone golems so that the stronger students could attack the Earth King himself. Michael and Jeremy rushed to attack the Earth King to deal with him, but the demon was only amused by their naivety. They clearly underestimated him. So he used earth magic against the approaching enemies. While Michael and the others were fighting one of the 4 heavenly kings, Caleb and Maya arrived in the city of Neutrat, which had been captured by the Demon King's army. Maya had no idea that they would have to use the sewers to get into the city. She didn't like the smell at all. But Caleb reassured the girl, saying that they had already passed the city walls and would soon be able to go outside. It was dangerous to go through other passages because the demons could see in the dark, and there was a continuous open field around the city. In addition, the large border cities had strong defenses, so they would not have passed otherwise. A staircase appeared in the distance, and Caleb realized that they would now be able to get to the surface. Finally, they found a ladder that helped them get to the surface. As soon as they left the sewers, the elf began to look at herself with disgust. But Caleb noticed some movement in the distance, so he and the girl hid behind a barrel. 2 demons passed by, discussing that they had come to the guard of the witch lady. It was a good chance, but even under her command it was not a fact that they would be able to achieve any military merit. It seemed that the witch was not interested in this. They said that the lady was incredibly talented, but her interest in the service itself left much to be desired. With that, the demons disappeared, and Caleb and Maya were finally able to come out of hiding. Caleb realized that the witch was most likely the princess of the demon kingdom herself, who ruled this city. Maya knew about her, and heard that she was called the Witch of the Void. Most likely this is the witch they were looking for. Before leaving, the elf advised Caleb to go to a border town where a witch lived who could control space and who might be able to help the guy. Now he only had one question left. How can he contact the princess? After all, if they appeared before her, it would turn into another battle. To begin with, he decided to gather more information and asked Maya to follow him and not do anything unnecessary. The girl agreed in fear. As a result, they had to make their way and hide from the demons for a long time to find a place where they could hide. Having climbed into one of the buildings and observed the demons from above, they realized that in this city the demons were leading their ordinary lives. The elf was even partly disappointed because she expected to see something different, but Caleb was not surprised. Demons have sufficiently developed intelligence to understand human speech, so their habits can be similar to those of humans. Suddenly, the elf noticed how the demon was beating a little boy with particular cruelty because he was following orders too slowly. For some reason, Maya was very shocked by the sight of human slaves. Although there was nothing surprising in this, demons often use such a practice after capturing cities, and Maya knew about it very well. But seeing it happen in person, she finally realized how twisted demons really are. While studying the demons, the couple did not notice how another demon approached them closely, who immediately recognized the arriving strangers. Caleb prepared to fight, but the demon girl dissuaded him, saying that she did not come here to fight, but with good intentions. Looking at her, Caleb was surprised at how this girl was able to get so close to them and suspected that she used some kind of magical technique. But she calmly explained that she only found them because she sensed strangers entering through her barrier and went looking for them. Maya did not believe her words, since when she entered the city, she did not feel any signs of magic. This was not surprising, because no one was able to detect this demon's spatial magic. After scanning the girl's abilities, Caleb realized that she was most likely the princess they were looking for. Isabel finally introduced herself and asked Caleb to answer her questions nicely, or she would call the soldiers. She wanted to know what the human and the elf were doing in her city, since they didn't look like scouts. Looking at this girl, the hero understood that it was unlikely that they would be able to survive the battle against her, so he decided to continue the peaceful dialogue. He immediately warned that the story of his arrival was quite long and drawn out, but Isabella agreed to listen. Apparently, initially she came to look for them only to while away the time. Then Caleb revealed that rumor had it that the fifth princess's spatial magic could help him return to his own world. Isabella wasn't surprised, because she really could send people to other dimensions. But she said that she needed to know the exact coordinates of Caleb's original world, and asked where the world he came from was. After all, even though the movement spell itself is not the most complicated, without the necessary coordinates, she will not be able to send him anywhere. Isabella explained to Caleb the difficulty of finding the exact coordinates of his world among countless others, each with unique features. The hero used the truth assessment ability on the witch and realized with regret that she was not lying about the difficulties of his return home. The demon princess spoke of an additional difficulty. Usually, the body of the desired person was used as a magical navigator to determine the coordinates. Isabella explained that her magic was powerless against the protective barrier of Caleb's blessing, making it impossible to determine his home world. The hero, feeling his hope fading, asked the witch if the only way to return home was to kill the demon king. The young man was deeply disappointed by the lack of an easy way out, which shattered his hopes for an easy solution to the problem of return. Caleb realized the inevitability of a battle with the powerful demon king, whose power struck terror into all living things. The princess, seeing the seriousness in the hero's gaze, understood his determination to fight the king despite his desire to find an easier way. Maya was uneasy about the fifth demon princess's willingness to help them, suspecting that the heir to the kingdom had hidden interests. Isabella, not wanting to explain anything, suddenly opened a sparkling portal and began to leave, leaving the heroes in confusion. The princess warned the boys about the difficulties of escaping from a city teeming with demons, and with a smile wished them luck before disappearing. Caleb breathed a sigh of relief, glad that they were still alive after meeting a powerful princess with colossal powers. The hero understood that they were incredibly lucky to have Isabella's help, but he realized that he had to pay a high price for this support. Turning to the window, the travelers realized with horror that the demons already knew of their arrival, probably from Isabella herself. Caleb, not understanding the motives of the mysterious demoness, suggested that Maya urgently leave the inhospitable place before they fell into a trap. The fugitives decided to move along the rooftops of houses in order to remain a more difficult target for the demons searching for them. Below, the demons methodically searched every corner of the city in search of Caleb and Maya, leaving them no chance for easy salvation. Analyzing the behavior of the demons, Caleb came to the conclusion that there was a clear order and the pursuers were confident in the location of the fugitives. The hero suddenly noticed something interesting, stopping abruptly and ordering Maya to hide behind the ledge of the roof. Caleb felt a huge magical power, comparable or even superior to Isabella's, which made him wary. After a tense wait, the hero finally saw the demon who had decided to visit this city, which caused him anxiety. Maya recognized with horror the demon that appeared as her sworn enemy, realizing the fateful nature of her decision to go on a journey with Caleb. After scanning the demon's abilities, Caleb realized that he was insanely strong, so he quietly asked the elf to calm down because now there was no way they could defeat him. Besides, he finally realized who was able to find them. It wasn't the fifth princess who revealed their location, but Winberg's wind technique that helped find them. But it seemed that the Heavenly King himself was little concerned about the presence of spies. He knew that as soon as they were discovered, they would be killed immediately. He was more worried about the hero candidates who were sent to the front. Their commander, the Wind King, had decided to remain here where he could be of more use, as he believed that managing the soldiers and reserves suited him much better and did not want to risk leaving that task to others. The demon received a notification from his wind currents, which reported that although their spies were moving very carefully, they were nearby. So he gave the order to prepare a search party. He was very interested in the people and the elf that the witch had decided to hide, and he was eager to have a lot of fun with these spies. Caleb and Maya have managed to successfully avoid detection so far, as the demons do not know their exact location. But suddenly the elf noticed that the wind currents began to move unnaturally. Her heightened senses told her that this was not a good sign. It became obvious that one of the Heavenly Kings had decided to use a wind attribute search, which would cause them a lot of trouble. But if Maya tried to use magic to destroy this technique, they would be even more likely to be discovered. So Caleb decided to leave things as they were, hoping they wouldn't get caught. No matter how hard they tried to hide, due to the elf's carelessness, they were still discovered. Then Caleb decided to use the girl as bait and quickly moved up the roof. Maya was in a great panic, but Caleb reminded her that she wanted to get her revenge, and she certainly wouldn't be able to do it if she couldn't escape from a simple chase. Then the girl realized that she had no choice but to fight. She began to burn her enemies with the power of her spirits. The other demons noticed this furious fire, but Caleb was already rushing to help to deal with them. The battle dragged on, and although Maya managed to hold the line and keep the demons from getting any closer, there were more and more of them. But suddenly she began to notice that instead of demons, more and more dead bodies were appearing. The reason for this was Caleb, who had quietly crept up from behind and was delivering lightning-fast blows. With the help of the wind currents, Winberg realized that the search party had suffered huge losses. And since they were able to trap the spies, he decided not to increase the number of deaths any further, but to deal with the fugitives himself. The fleeing Maya felt the wind currents, which clearly had a foreign mana in them, followed by powerful attacks, which they could barely fight off. Finally, they noticed Winberg hovering in the sky. Realizing that they could not avoid a direct confrontation, Caleb asked Maya to prepare to carry out her long-awaited revenge. The girl was already ready for this because she had imagined this moment for at least 10 years, training and preparing for it every day. But Caleb knew for sure that if the battle dragged on, they would definitely lose, so they had to deal with Winberg as quickly as possible, preferably with one decisive blow. Maya understood this well, so she immediately prepared a powerful wind spirit magic to knock Winberg out of the sky. The demon felt that his opponents were either too brave or too stupid to understand that he was one of the 4 heavenly kings who could not be defeated in his native element. Taking advantage of the moment while Winberg was fending off Maya's powerful spell, Caleb decided to get closer to the man to strike in close combat, but his attack was quickly stopped by Winberg's magic. The demon explained with a grin that his search wind spell wouldn't miss even the slightest movement, so Caleb wouldn't be able to take advantage of his blind spots. This was a serious problem for the hero, since the Winberg windstream was a natural enemy for his killing techniques. Maya quickly realized this, so she decided to take on this task herself, manipulating the wind. She knew for sure that the search technique worked through subtle manipulation of air currents, but if she were to constantly interfere with these currents, it would completely destroy Winberg's technique. Even Winberg was surprised that the girl knew how his magic worked. It seemed strange for an ordinary elf. Caleb, however, was amazed at how much the thirst for revenge affected Maya, who so quickly pulled herself together and showed incredible abilities. Thanks to Maya's support, Caleb managed to get close to the enemy, but at that moment Winberg soared into the sky, which is why the hero was unable to strike. However, Maya quickly noticed this and lifted Caleb with her wind currents. He rushed straight towards the enemy. Once close enough, Caleb used his special tactic of anticipating and mapping out the enemy's weak points. He was ready to deliver a precise blow, but at some point his technique suddenly dissipated. Winberg managed to avoid the attack, although he was surprised that someone forced him to draw his weapon. While fighting off the demon's precise attacks, Caleb realized that he had used his precognition too early and had put himself in a bad position. But the elf managed to distract the demon with earth magic in time and then returned Caleb to a safe distance. Seeing the scale of the earth attack, Winberg realized that if that huge rock were to fly at him, even his wind magic would have a hard time blocking it. The elf in front of him was clearly not simple, which seemed strange considering that the elf village had been destroyed long ago. Winberg realized that Maya was the last survivor of the elven village and began to laugh maliciously, remembering the day of the massacre of the villagers. The demon was especially amused by the fact that each elf fought not for his own life, but for the lives of his loved ones, begging to spare at least one. Maya lost her temper at these words, but Caleb brought her to her senses in time, reminding her not to give in to provocations. The hero feverishly thought about tactics to defeat the enemy, with effective attacks for both long-range and close combat. Winberg continued to mock, amazed at the resilience of his opponents, especially considering that the boy was a simple man. The demon suddenly realized that Caleb must be the new hero candidate, but he didn't consider him a serious threat. The young man was nervous, realizing that his precognition would last no more than 3 minutes, after which they faced imminent death. Maya, her eyes lit up with determination, asked Caleb to help her by telling her that she had a plan of action. The elf sent Caleb on a wind current towards the enemy, while simultaneously using earth magic to distract Winberg. Huge boulders of stone rushed towards the demon, allowing Caleb to get as close to the enemy as possible. The hero, covered by Maya's attacks, managed to attack the demon, aiming at his hand, and take the enemy's blade. Caleb moved to the roof of the building before the stunned Winberg could get his bearings, and Maya continued to attack the demon. Winberg stood up again, surprised that someone thought it possible to defeat one of the heavenly kings with ordinary earthly magic. Despite the demon's loud words, Caleb understood that everything was going according to his original plan. Maya spoke about the demon's weakness to earthly magic and proposed a plan of action to eliminate him. The hero approved of the elf's plan, but asked her to do everything possible so that he could get closer and take Winberg's sword. Neither the demon nor the elf understood why Caleb needed a weapon that he did not know how to use. To the enemy's surprise, the hero felt more confident with a sword in his hands and was able to get close to Winberg. The demon noticed that Caleb's movements became sharper and more precise, like those of an experienced swordsman. Winberg was taken aback by the surprise and left himself open to attack, allowing Caleb to strike with lightning speed and decapitate him. As he fell, the demon did not understand how he had lost this fight and why the guy suddenly began to move like an experienced swordsman. It turned out that it was all thanks to Caleb's blessing of copying, which allowed him to copy one skill of another person upon personal observation. The hero first used this power by copying Winberg's fencing style, which became his trump card, but an uncertain one. It became clear that the current candidates for heroes were stronger than their predecessors and were rightfully considered the main hope of humanity. Caleb told the dying Winberg that he received his power after battling his apprentice Hector. The defeated demon finally realized that his foolish disciple had unknowingly helped their common enemy survive with his death. Breathing heavily after the battle, Caleb and Maya realized the power of the 4 heavenly kings and the battles the hero would have to face with the rest of the demons. Besides the heavenly kings, there was also the demon king, who surpassed all in strength, and his children, like the mysterious Isabel. Caleb knew it was too early for him to fight them, as he was too weak for it. Maya was still coming to her senses, not believing in the defeat of her sworn enemy and the accomplishment of the long-awaited revenge. The elf was sure that in order to win, she would have to sacrifice herself, but everything ended unexpectedly and almost unbelievably. Despite the irreversibility of the dead, Maya felt a long-awaited peace, freed from the heavy burden of the past. Caleb sincerely thanked the girl for her help, without which he would have lost, and acknowledged her undeniable strength. Maya understood that it was Caleb who deserved gratitude, because without his resourcefulness and courage, she would not have coped with a powerful enemy. The elf was glad that she listened to her wise mentor and went on a journey with Caleb, avoiding a senseless death alone. The girl realized that the insightful sage had probably foreseen this, and therefore insisted on their journey together. Maya didn't know what to do next because the goal of her life had been achieved, and now she had to look for a new meaning. The elf, being a half-blood, understood that her life would not be as long as her mentor's, but she still had time. The girl decided to continue traveling with the hero, feeling the inextricable connection of their paths and readiness for the upcoming dangers. Maya's new goal became to protect other people from the grief she had to endure, so that no one else would experience such pain. Caleb, seeing Maya's determination, accepted her as a full member of the team and suggested that they leave immediately, fearing enemy reinforcements. The mysterious Isabel, who was watching the battle from above, was impressed by the victory over the heavenly king, and her interest in the heroes increased. Caleb and Maya returned to Elbana, the wise elf mentor, to tell about their adventures. Elbana rejoiced at their safe return and was amazed by Maya's accomplished revenge, which freed the girl from a heavy burden. The mentor understood the student's desire to continue the journey with Caleb and was confident that together they would overcome any difficulties. Elbana brought Caleb disturbing news of the crushing defeat of the advance party of candidates at the front. The hero could not believe that his strong classmate Michael had lost, but after learning about his opponent, the King of Earth, he realized the power of the Heavenly Kings. Caleb learned that the candidates had miraculously survived the terrible battle, but their morale had fallen sharply, which threatened serious consequences for the war. Realizing the seriousness of the situation, Caleb decided to go to his classmates on his own. After all, his ultimate goal of killing the Demon King himself would be made easier if Michael and the others helped him destroy the remaining Heavenly Kings. Maya was curious to know the true strength of the other candidates. And while he didn't know how much their abilities had changed during his absence, he knew that the most important thing was how the hero candidates would use that power on the front lines. After the failed battle, there were many casualties among both ordinary knights and potential heroes. The doctors tried their best to heal the severe wounds of the victims, but even their magical powers were already at their limit, because the injuries were too serious. As the candidates began to lose, Gerald and the rest of the soldiers joined them, allowing them to retreat. But after this bloody battle, all of them were seriously wounded not only physically, but also mentally. Michael, who was supposed to defeat the enemy leader but was unable to do so, blamed himself the most. It took some time before Caleb and Maya reached the front lines. With each passing day, Caleb's powers grew more and more, and now he could detect enemies even at a very long distance. It was thanks to this amazing skill that the next Heavenly King was noticed. The elf was amazed at how convenient and versatile Caleb's skill was. And Caleb himself was only now beginning to understand the full value of his ability, although he had previously considered it almost useless. After conducting a detailed assessment, he was able to not only analyze the enemy's skills, but also identify his special talent. While on defense, the demon's normal abilities were amplified several times. This gave the hero more insight into how the enemy's skills worked, which could give him a significant advantage in the future. But unfortunately, when trying to find weak points, Caleb was unable to find anything. This made the task much more difficult, making the upcoming battle even more dangerous. But even so, Caleb had no right to give up. Too much depended on his success. He told Maya that the demon had a high level of mastery of earth and fencing techniques, as well as a unique skill that worked if he defended himself. Maya knew perfectly well that the demon could not be equally good in all earthly techniques, so he must have some specific, especially powerful ability. So if they figured out what the spell was, they could figure out its weak points. Maya even had a couple of guesses, and Caleb had already figured out how he could get the information he needed without putting himself at unnecessary risk. At this time, Michael was mentally preparing himself to go into the next battle with the demon alone. But turning around, he noticed with surprise that the entire team had gathered behind him, as if expecting him to now single-handedly enter this deadly fight. Sarah was very unhappy that Michael, as always, did what he wanted and never asked anyone for help. Emily supported the girl's point of view, not wanting the leader to fight and solve all the problems alone. It seemed like Michael's classmates simply didn't trust him, but the problem was that he acted as if he didn't trust them at all. Ray explained that not only had Michael become stronger during his time in this world, so he could trust them and share his heavy burden with them. At this point, Jeremy also appeared, wanting Michael to trust him more in the next attack and allow him to attack more freely with his powerful explosion. Jeremy admitted that he couldn't handle this demon alone, so he wanted to join the clan in order to defeat the enemy together. His classmates were shocked that the usually independent Jeremy agreed to work with someone on a team. And even Michael was so amazed by this that he agreed to accept the help of his friends and defeat the demons together, combining their powers. Watching from the side, Caroline realized that although her classmates had finally come together, they still didn't have any concrete plan to defeat the Earth King. But suddenly she heard a familiar voice, and looking back she realized that Caleb had decided to visit them. The boy asked the girl to tell him everything she had learned during the battle with the Heavenly King, when she shared information that this demon was able to create and control golems. He did not show any other abilities during the battle. Caleb realized that in that case, Maya was right, and the demon only had an affinity for this type of magic. Thanking her for the valuable information, he was about to leave, but Caroline asked Caleb to join the fight with them. However, he knew that if he acted openly, he would create problems within the team due to his special status. So he promised to help them, but he would act from the shadows, as always. This decision calmed Caroline, who understood the complexity of Caleb's situation. Over time, a group of hero candidates gathered together, training hard and honing their skills before the next invasion attempt. This time, their ranks were replenished with new fighters, which gave them hope for success. Sarah was especially happy about this, whose friends had finally come to their senses and were able to participate in battles in the combat unit. Although Sarah was still worried about why the girls suddenly changed their minds and decided to join them. One of them explained that she saw how hard everyone was trying, and after a recent loss, she decided to join them to help, but that was only half the truth. 5 days ago, as she was returning home after another tiring shift as a waitress, she heard a familiar voice in her room. At this time, Caleb was waiting for her there, and he clearly frightened the girl with his unexpected presence, but she soon calmed down, recognizing him. Not wanting to drag out the conversation, Caleb explained that Michael and the others were currently fighting on the front lines, but in order for them to win, they needed the power of water manipulation. The girl fearfully explained that she was not in a combat squad, but Caleb knew for sure that she had a fighting spirit and that she could become an excellent fighter. The girl was afraid that she would not cope with this important mission and would only let everyone down if she joined, but this was not her true fear, but only the fear imposed by Eleanor. Now Eleanor was dead, and nothing more limited the girl's potential. Besides, enough time had passed for her mental wounds to heal. Caleb gently reminded her that now was not the time to continue playing the role of the awkward, plate-smashing waitress. The hero understood that the girl was needed by Sarah and the rest of his friends, so he urged her to think carefully and join them. These words clearly convinced her much more than she expected, although the girl was still surprised that Caleb was so considerate of his classmates' feelings. Besides, she felt like Caleb would want to join them in this fight and become part of the fighting squad. But this opportunity was not available to him, so he promised that he would not abandon them and would act from the shadows. But now, helping them win was part of his job to save this world. Remembering this conversation, the girl promised herself that she would try her best if her powers could really benefit the team and possibly save someone's life. Caroline, who was nearby, listened attentively to their entire conversation, as she had been initially familiar with Caleb's plan. When he told her about his desire to bring the water mage over to their side, she was very hesitant, because she was afraid that it would only put them in even greater danger. Caleb wasn't entirely sure if his plan would work, since he had never fought this particular demon before. But he believed in the strength of his classmates, who would definitely find an effective way to confront the enemy. However, he warned them that they should think carefully before acting. He asked Caroline to tell Michael that he would look forward to seeing how much they had grown in his absence. Maya and the hero watched from afar. The elf clearly doubted the boys' victory, believing that their plan was much weaker than the one an experienced hero could have come up with. But Caleb knew that if he had developed a precise plan for them, they would never become independent. Since his goal now was to kill the Demon King himself, he needed strong and independent allies to do so. Now he saw that the hero candidates had become much stronger, but they still could not control their strength enough, so he decided to help them by giving them hints. But what was more important was how they themselves decided to act in battle, because in the future, they would have to decide everything on their own, without his support. Finally, the time came for the offensive under the command of Amelia, who led her brave soldiers into battle. They fearlessly rushed towards the army of demons to clear the way for the hero candidates. The candidates were also able to advance successfully despite the hordes of monsters around them. But as soon as they got closer to the gloomy castle, they saw a demon waiting for them in one of the high windows, who clearly this time would definitely not let them leave alive. However, the heroes had no intention of retreating. As soon as they burst into the main hall, they immediately began to carry out their carefully thought-out plan. Caleb and Maya had been closely monitoring the situation all this time and were in control of it, but were in no hurry to intervene, giving the hero candidates a chance to prove themselves. Finally, new participants entered the fray, and the ability to manipulate water turned out to be especially useful, literally causing the stone golems to melt before our eyes. In addition to the strong disciples, those who had previously been more afraid of encountering demons also entered the battle. Now, after defeating the golems, due to the fact that they were completely soaked in water, the stone creatures could no longer rise and made only pitiful attempts, which were not crowned with success. The demon was surprised to notice the strong influence of the water technique on the course of the battle, recognizing the new mage's invaluable contribution to the battle. Caleb, watching his comrades, felt pride and hope for overcoming difficulties and saving the world from darkness. Maya remembered information from ancient tomes about the effect of moisture on the control of golems, which turned out to be the key to victory. Michael, noticing the effectiveness of the tactic, ordered the mages to continue attacking the golems with water, clearing the way for the melee fighters. The massive water wave attack was extremely effective, turning most of the stone creatures into shapeless heaps. According to plan, the remaining mages and melee fighters entered the battle, methodically finishing off the remaining golems. The demon was impressed by the changed strategy and the coherence of the hero candidates. However, the enemy knew that the golems were just a simple tool, and he had more powerful tricks up his sleeve. The demon summoned huge stone needles, demonstrating to the candidates the true power of the earth element. Many of the fighters panicked, but Emily showed her telekinetic powers, stopping the flying boulders. With an incredible effort of will, the girl managed to take control of all the stone projectiles hanging in the air. The demon understood that Emily needed a huge amount of magical energy to counter his attack and control the land. Caroline had already entered the battle, and watching the events unfold, she had gathered enough strength and activated her magical control. Despite her opponent's impressive power, even he found it difficult to resist this mental influence. And although Caroline was only able to gain a couple of precious seconds, it was enough for Jeremy to get dangerously close. The demon, who had focused all his attention on Jeremy, whom he considered the main threat, completely overlooked the fact that there was another skilled melee fighter on the team. By this time, Michael had already quietly gotten close enough and raised his sharp blade for the decisive blow. But the demon, as if sensing danger with his sixth sense, at the last moment drew his huge sword, which stopped Michael's attack with a clang. Sparks flew from the clash of blades, and the air was filled with the ringing of metal. Emily had been waiting for this moment. She instantly sent all the stones she had been holding back straight to their former master, turning them into a real stone storm. In addition, a wind mage came to her aid, who began to combine an earth attack with sharp wind spears, creating a deadly whirlwind. And although the attacks were quite effective, the demon had not yet managed to show the true depths of his power. He defended himself from all these attacks with lightning speed, erecting a powerful stone wall. But even this seemingly impenetrable protection was not perfect. Water could still affect the soil from which the shield was made. The soaked ground, after continuous attacks, began to lose its firmness, becoming increasingly fragile and vulnerable. Now it was easier for the heroes to break through this weakened defense. After waiting for the right moment, Michael and Jeremy attacked together, which clearly caught the demon off guard. Their combined attack was so powerful and unexpected that even the powerful enemy could not fully repel it. Although the demon could still return to action now, he began to realize that if such devastating attacks continued, the hero candidates would indeed defeat him. He decided that he would no longer waste his energy on defense, and all the colossal energy that he had previously put into his defense, he was now going to direct into a destructive attack. Caleb, who remained unnoticed and closely followed the progress of the battle, was literally waiting for this moment. At the right moment, he managed to notice the opponent's weak spot, which was open only for a split second, and all that was left for him was to attack the demon in time and unnoticed by the others, delivering a decisive blow. The classmates were in shock for a while, not believing their eyes, but after the first moments of numbness, they began to rejoice at their unexpected. But both guys, looking at the body of the defeated demon, clearly understood that they were not the cause of his death. At some point, Jeremy noticed a familiar dagger lying near the body. He knew perfectly well who this deadly weapon belonged to. Finally, Michael also noticed a barely noticeable crack in the ceiling. He instantly realized that Caleb had probably been hiding there all this time, carefully watching their fight and waiting for the right moment to intervene. But Michael didn't want to upset his classmates who sincerely believed that it was their plan and efforts that led them to success. So he decided to remain silent and rejoice along with everyone else, allowing them to enjoy the moment of triumph. Besides, he finally truly understood the essence and importance of teamwork, because this time they succeeded not only because water magic had an advantage in battle. At the last moment, the enormous amount of magical energy that the demon began to release made Michael realize that they definitely couldn't cope with his true power. Most likely, Caleb understood this as well, which is why he decided to intervene to help them at a critical moment in the battle. Emilia noticed a fleeting sadness on Michael's face and tried to cheer him up so that he would join in the general jubilation. Michael even wanted to tell her the truth that they hadn't really reached a level high enough to defeat such a demon on their own, but it seemed the girl didn't want to listen to him. She truly believed that they had defeated one of the 4 heavenly kings, and this belief gave her strength. Even when he tried to explain that the victory wasn't theirs alone, Emily playfully pushed him into a crowd of cheering classmates who began praising Michael for his excellent strategy and brilliant leadership. The same thing happened to Jeremy, who was surrounded by the guys from his team. They were ready to follow such a brave commander even to the ends of the earth, inspired by their common victory. But they could see very well that their commander was upset about something. They also noticed that the final blow had not been dealt to them, but they were not upset. After all, they understood that this was just the finishing touch. They were the ones who did everything possible to corner the demon and not let him escape. After a moment of joy, Michael gathered his courage and went to the highest tower of the captured fortress, and from there, he ordered the remaining demons to surrender, as they would no longer be able to receive the protection of their fallen leader. Emilia, hearing this, joyfully announced to her exhausted but unbroken soldiers their long-awaited victory. Even Gerald, who was badly wounded in this fierce battle, rejoiced with the others as never before in their common, hard-won victory. Caleb, watching everything that was happening from the side, realized that the battle was over and they could leave. But Maya, who was standing next to him, clearly saw that even despite the victory over the leader, the demons were still in the numerical majority. Caleb explained that the lack of a leader was no longer an insurmountable obstacle, as the demon troops moved forward mainly due to the charisma of the commanders. Maya recalled a similar situation after defeating Winberg, realizing the key weakness of the demon army: disorganization without a leader. The elf wondered if Caleb was happy with the outcome of events, since instead of training the candidates, he had to kill the demon himself, depriving them of the opportunity to test their strength. During the climax of the battle, the demon became particularly enraged, and many of the hero candidates could have died if not for Caleb's timely intervention. The elf noted with a smile that despite all his outward cold-bloodedness, Caleb still turned out to be a rather caring person, ready to take risks for the sake of his comrades. Caleb didn't argue with that observation. His thoughts were already occupied by the remaining 2 demons of the 4 heavenly kings. Apart from them, there were also the direct descendants of the demon king, whose strength was unknown, but was certainly superior to that of ordinary demons. In order to reach the demon king himself, Caleb still had to go through an incredibly long and dangerous path, full of surprises and deadly traps. At this time, the demons managed to get themselves a new captive. It was a girl of the beast class, whose appearance in history could change the balance of power. The captive remained warlike and rebellious even in the lair of enemies, which was not surprising for a princess brought up in the traditions of strength and courage. The capture of the beastmen princess could seriously change the balance of power in the war, putting their alliance under the control of the demons. The week following the assassination of Stongai, one of the heavenly kings, was marked by a sharp advance of the united human army, inspiring the people. The fame of the hero candidates grew with each passing day, turning them into a symbol of hope and resistance against a powerful enemy. The impressed king personally congratulated Michael as the leader of the squad of candidates for defeating the heavenly king. In recognition of Michael's services, the king awarded him the title of knight, unprecedented for his background. After the ceremony, Michael and Emily went to have tea with the commanders, who noticed the young hero's excitement. Gerald understood Michael's anxiety, given his non-aristocratic background and the painstaking preparations for the ceremony. Everyone was proud of Michael, who performed flawlessly at the ceremony, demonstrating determination and the ability to quickly adapt. Michael was afraid of making mistakes at the ceremony, fearing the king's wrath and removal from his new position. The hero realized the need for further training in order to properly fulfill the duty of a knight. Amelia reassured Michael by explaining that the real power in the country belonged to the church, not the knights. Michael became a holy knight and captain of the 11th Hero Squad, which the authorities had high hopes for. The hero did not understand the point of being appointed a knight under the control of the church, but did not want to delve into complex political intrigues. Michael was told that he needed to live up to his new status as equal to Gerald and Amelia. Caroline reported to Caleb about Michael's new status and his right to vote in important government matters. Maya didn't understand why Caleb and Caroline were discussing this as a problem, considering the candidate's fame to be deserved. Caleb understood that the Holy Land, by giving Michael power, was demonstrating control over the hero candidates. Despite the call of the saint, the candidates could not fully trust the holy power. It was obvious that for the saint and the country, the candidates were just a tool to achieve the desired result. Caroline promised to monitor the squad's behavior in the new political realities and asked to be introduced to Caleb's new companion. Caroline and Maya officially met, and the half-elf mage made a strong impression, causing slight jealousy. Maya, noticing Caroline's reaction, explained the purpose of the trip with Caleb and expressed her incomprehension of jealousy. Caleb, tired of the girls' squabbles, turned the conversation to a plan to kill the Demon King. The hero planned to operate from the shadows, using Caroline as a link to the class. Caroline understood the importance of her role, but she wanted to go on the journey with Caleb and Maya. She was refused because without her, Caleb would not be able to contact his hostile classmates. For Caleb, Caroline was an indispensable ally in the current situation. Caroline explained that not everyone in the group considered Caleb an enemy, mentioning Michael and Ray. Caleb noted that Michael would likely not want to rely on his help, which was normal for development. The hero decided to train Michael from afar, realizing that he could not cope with the army of demons alone. Maya spoke about defeating one of the 4 kings, emphasizing that they were on the verge of death. Caroline was amazed by Caleb's increased abilities, which allowed him to defeat the Sky King. Maya emphasized that they almost died in the battle with the Air King, despite their training and strength. Caroline compared their victory to the entire class's hardships against the Earth King. The girl realized that Maya's power was great, since Caleb relied on her help. Caroline realized that her own power was primitive compared to theirs. Caleb explained that the heavenly kings were not the main problem, and that there were stronger opponents in the demon army. The hero asked Caroline to improve herself and watch over her classmates and the sacred land. Caleb asked for regular reports, promising to do everything to destroy the Demon King. After saying goodbye, Caroline decided to become stronger so that she could be a useful ally in the future. After defeating the Heavenly King, the Holy Army's large-scale offensive began. The 11th Detachment of Heroes broke through the front line, instilling hope in the hearts of the soldiers. The army recaptured the nearby lands and the city of Neutrath in the Organo Mountains. Success was made possible by the death of Stongay and the unknown death of Winberg. These blows disorganized the demon army, but the Holy Army was unaware of the third king that had been defeated. The hero candidates were invited to a sumptuous feast after another victory. Michael overheard classmates talking about doubts about the reality of their success. The hero himself wondered about the reasons for such rapid advancement at the front. Unaware of Winberg's death, Michael suspected a possible demonic trap. Even Commander Amelia, an experienced strategist and warrior, came to a similar conclusion, which made her increase her vigilance. But Sarah reminded that after checking, there was no confirmation of this theory, so she asked her classmates to put their worries aside. And although everyone tried to follow Sarah's advice, Michael could not shake the thought that Caleb was somehow involved in this matter, who could influence the Demon King's army, bringing confusion into their ranks. Sarah was skeptical about the idea of traitor Caleb influencing the demon army. These words, thrown so casually and with obvious disdain, hurt Caroline very much, and she could not restrain herself and decided to explain to Sarah and the others the truth that she knew. Her classmates froze in shock, gathering around Caroline and hungrily catching her every word. She explained that they were able to advance so easily because Caleb had personally killed one of the 4 heavenly kings who was responsible for defending these lands. Michael, hearing this, believed it to be true. He had already recognized Caleb's amazing abilities more than once and knew what he was capable of. Ray also knew that their classmate was very strong, but he had no idea that Caleb was capable of something as grandiose as killing one of the strongest demons. Sarah was indignant when she heard this. She did not want to believe what she considered a blatant lie, and even turned to Jeremy, hoping that he would support her point of view. But Jeremy, to her surprise, clearly couldn't deny Caleb's obvious influence on the war. He chose to avoid a direct answer, which in itself spoke volumes. The only one who sided with Sarah was Amelia, who categorically refused to forgive the traitor, even though his help could have been decisive in this war. While the two girls continued to develop their thoughts, heatedly arguing with each other, Michael decided to take advantage of the moment and tried to find out more news from Caroline about Caleb. However, Caroline herself didn't really know anything about his current location and plans. The only thing she was sure of was that the guy wanted to kill the Demon King. Now, as far as Caroline knew, the hero was somewhere in the lands of the Demon Kingdom, which were located to the west of the recently recaptured Neutrat. Every day he moved deeper into enemy territory, where increasingly powerful and dangerous opponents awaited him. But Caleb's abilities also grew significantly during this time. He acquired a new offensive ability, a powerful thunderous blow that could crush even the most resilient enemies. Despite mastering an impressive offensive ability, Caleb's control over it remained low, often putting him at risk in combat. Caleb was grateful to Maya for her invaluable help and support, although he resented her interference in his battles. The hero was concerned about the lack of improvements in control over the new ability to an acceptable level. Caleb barely had control over the basic techniques of the Thunder attribute, which was considered one of the rarest and most difficult to master. Thunder attacks were faster and more powerful than other elemental attacks, but required tremendous strength, concentration, and precision from the mage. Caleb's friends gained control over attributes through the blessing, giving them a huge advantage in mastering the elements. The hero didn't understand why. After many hours of training, he still couldn't effectively use the skill in real combat. Maya noticed that Caleb was distracted by various factors during the battle and did not have a clear understanding of the technique. The elf explained the importance of creating an exact image of the desired effect before bringing magic into reality. Caleb was stubborn about using thunder for close combat, despite Maya's doubts about the effectiveness of such an approach. The hero explained the need for a new power to defeat the Demon King, despite his reluctance to delve into the study of magic. Caleb recognized the value of Maya's wise advice, which helped him avoid many of the mistakes newcomers made in learning magic. A sudden attack by a horde of goblins gave Caleb the opportunity to practice his new skills. The hero used the Thunderstrike technique on the first group of goblins, using the situation for training. Despite the progress, the attack power was still not enough to kill the enemy, only to intimidate him. A more effective tactic remained a mana-enhanced strike, although it also required a lot of energy and concentration. Caleb admitted that the effect of the mana-enhanced strike was worth the effort, despite the difficulty of using it. The hero methodically destroyed the goblins, using new tactics and developing agility and reaction. Despite Caleb's efforts, the number of monsters seemed endless. The cause of the endless stream of enemies turned out to be the goblin boss, a huge and ugly creature. Caleb was delighted to see the boss, eager to test his new powers on him. Maya, tired of the endless battle, suggested returning to a safe place. The elf pointed out the impossibility of advancing due to the constant attacks of monsters from all sides. Caleb, satisfied with his victory over the boss and the results of the training, agreed to Maya's proposal. After an exhausting training session, the heroes had to run for a long time to escape pursuit. Strategic retreat became the best tactic against numerous and powerful demons. Maya suspected that some of the pursuing monsters might be controlled by higher demons. Caleb and Maya made an unplanned stop when they found themselves at a dead end on top of a tall mountain. The heroes realized with horror that they had entered the territory of the Demon Kingdom. The Holy Kingdom's army continued its campaign to retake the lands and began an invasion of the Demon Kingdom. But in the Demon Lands, there were many more monsters, and they were much stronger than those the army had encountered before. The would-be heroes dealt with the threat, but ordinary soldiers became easy prey for the cruel creatures. Gerald noticed that the monsters did not attack chaotically, but as if under the control of a powerful demon. Michael assumed that the demon controlling the monsters must be at least of the highest rank. From afar, the battle was watched by the greater demon Elsa, who controlled all the monsters around her. Elsa was ready to use any number of monsters to destroy the human army. After wiping out most of the army, the demoness planned to send her elite troops. Michael, noticing the advance of the demons, signaled to Amelia about the need for an urgent retreat. Despite the quick retreat, many ordinary knights died in the unequal battle with the demonic creatures. The demons rejoiced in their victory, hoping to stop any further attacks by the holy knights. The enemies were counting on the support of the Beastmen alliance, which would deprive humanity of any chance of victory. The demons believed that the hero candidates would not be able to deal with the remaining enemies, especially with the support of the Beastmen. Caleb and Maya hid and eavesdropped on the demons' conversation from afar. The elf was surprised when she first heard about the demons' plans to control the Beastmen alliance. Caleb recognized the importance of this information and asked Maya to help him find out more. Amelia called an emergency meeting of commanders after the failed attempt to invade enemy territory. The commander was looking for ideas to fix a difficult situation without having her own plan of action. The main problem was considered to be the endless stream of new monsters, which made the invasion pointless. Another commander was worried about the unprecedented strength of the demon-tamed monsters. Gerald suspected that the monsters were being led by a particularly powerful and serious-minded demon. Michael noted the high level of the enemy's strategy, suggesting that he had extensive combat experience. The scouts were sent into enemy territory to gather critical information. Amelia understood the risk of the mission, but considered it necessary to plan for the further offensive. The commanders realized the difficulty of moving an entire army undetected through a forest teeming with monsters. It was decided to concentrate on strengthening and defending the recaptured lands, avoiding hasty actions. Emily reminded them of the main goal, the death of the Demon King, urging them not to forget about it. Amelia realized that Emily had some kind of plan of action prepared. The proposal to increase troop numbers was rejected as ineffective in the current situation. Michael understood that the number of soldiers would not solve the problem of superior monsters. The hero suggested focusing on expanding elite troops and training gifted fighters. This proved impossible, as all the high-level soldiers were already at the front lines. The conclusion was made about the need to recruit and intensively train new people to strengthen the army. Michael realized that there was a discrepancy between his team's goals and the intentions of his superiors. The hero candidates were eager to kill the Demon King quickly, in contrast to the cautious plans of the commanders. Gerald noticed Michael's agitation and asked his opinion. Michael expressed dissatisfaction with the long-term plan, which conflicted with his desire to quickly return home. Amelia explained the need for a 2-year period to rebuild the army and prepare to confront the demons. The commander stressed the difficulty of continuing the invasion under current conditions, despite the general desire for victory. Michael understood the command's arguments, but doubted his classmates' agreement with the long-term plan. The hero realized his comrade's desire to return home as soon as possible. Gerald discussed the situation with Michael, acknowledging that both sides were right. Michael began to understand the commander's position, although he could not fully accept the long wait. Gerald advised Michael to think carefully about the situation, reminding him of the dangers of haste in military affairs. The knight pointed out the risk of death of innocent people and comrades due to hasty actions. Gerald sincerely asked Michael not to take unnecessary risks. Emily understood the logic of the command, but she couldn't ignore the desire to return home. A recent near-death experience in battle with the Sky King has increased the hero's desire to return. The hierarchy of demon power suggested that the Demon King was much stronger than the 4 heavenly kings. Gerald admitted that even all the hero candidates together were unable to defeat the Demon King. Michael decided to discuss the situation with the team, realizing the danger of an immediate attack. The hero could not forgive himself for losing his friends due to hasty actions. Michael decided that they would return home after killing the Demon King when they were truly ready. The news of the command's plan shocked the group of hero candidates. Amelia announced that she might not return home for at least 2 years, upsetting her classmates. Michael explained the need for preparation to avoid senseless deaths. Jeremy expressed extreme dissatisfaction with the idea of waiting 2 years in an alien world. Michael explained the impossibility of relying on the military for support in reckless adventures. The hero stressed the need to follow a more cautious command strategy. Jeremy recalled the lack of trust in the sacred state and called for independent action. Michael responded sharply, emphasizing the need to accumulate strength and experience in order to survive. Jeremy suggested using stealth and cunning instead of direct confrontation. He reminded them that their goal was to kill the Demon King, not to defeat the entire army. Michael pointed out the excessive risk of Jeremy's plan and the possibility of many comrades being killed. Jeremy expressed his willingness to take risks and offered to turn down those who were not willing to take risks. Michael countered, emphasizing the priority of the safety of all comrades. The argument escalated into a physical altercation when Jeremy attacked Michael. Michael avoided the blow and tried to convince Jeremy again. The hero recalled his recent defeat at the hands of the Heavenly King, who was much weaker than the Demon King. Jeremy, unconvinced, prepared to attack again, but Caroline intervened with control magic. The girl scolded both of them for childish quarrels and demanded that they stop the conflict. Michael apologized for his behavior, realizing the controversy had been excessive. Jeremy surprised everyone by overcoming Caroline's magical control. Once freed, Jeremy explained his position on the need for real battles to grow in strength. Some of his classmates began to lean toward Jeremy's side, seeing his determination as a way home. Most remained on Michael's side, realizing the risk of senseless death. For some, the prospect of 2 years in an alien world seemed unbearable. Sarah's friend unexpectedly supported Jeremy's position, wanting him to return soon. The girl explained that her sick mother was left alone without support. It turned out that some had compelling reasons to rush home, including caring for younger relatives. Michael realized the gravity of the situation and the beginning of a split in the group. The group was divided, with half supporting Michael and half leaning towards Jeremy's plan. Jeremy announced his departure, and almost half of the group decided to follow him. Caroline was torn between wanting to return to her grandfather and asking Caleb to support Michael. At night, when Jeremy and his team had already prepared all their things to go on a dangerous journey, an unexpected event occurred. When it seemed like it was time to leave, Caleb suddenly approached Jeremy and asked him to step aside for an important conversation. Many of the classmates, as soon as they saw Caleb, immediately began to be indignant, surprised by his sudden appearance. But realizing that it was night and they needed to avoid unnecessary attention from the guards, everyone had to quickly calm down to listen to what Caleb would say. Jeremy, clearly impatient and wary, made it clear at once that they did not have much time. He demanded that Caleb quickly explain the reasons for his unexpected arrival. Without further ado, Caleb announced that he had come here to ask Jeremy for help. It turns out that long before this, Caleb and Maya had witnessed a split in the group of hero candidates. Caleb admitted that he understands the positions of both groups perfectly well. He agreed that Michael was right, that there was little they could do alone against a powerful enemy, but at the same time, he understood that simply following the decision of the sacred state and waiting 2 years was also unacceptable. Caleb agreed with Jeremy's position, admitting that they really couldn't wait 2 years and risk losing contact with their world. However, he also noted that Jeremy's plan to act immediately was too reckless and could get him and his entire team killed. Instead, Caleb proposed a third option. He already had 3 potential ways to turn the situation in their favor, and he wanted to discuss them with Jeremy and the others. The first method Caleb proposed was to influence the top of the state using Caroline's power. However, he admitted that the implementation of this plan was quite difficult and risky. While they could force the Holy Army to act as they needed to in order to achieve their goal of returning to their world, the consequences of such interference could be severe. Besides, Caleb doubted that Michael, who was still kind-hearted enough, would agree to such manipulations. The second option involved implementing Jeremy's idea of fighting not directly, but trying to destroy the Demon King from within his kingdom. According to Isabella's words and the information gathered, not everything was smooth in the Demon Kingdom either. Having penetrated deep into the country, they could try to ignite a civil war or find allies among those dissatisfied with the king's rule. However, knowing Jeremy's abilities very well, Caleb strongly doubted that he would be able to implement such a complex plan without support. The third method, which Caleb believed to be the most promising, required using all the information he had collected. At best, they would be able to gain support from other forces, such as the beastmen. With their support, at best, the Holy Army would be able to act more confidently and not have to wait 2 years to accumulate their forces. Eventually, Caleb told Jeremy his plan and explained that the daughter of the head of the Kushka race of beastmen had been captured by the demon army. From what he knew, this princess was extremely important to her people. They learned this while torturing several soldiers from the Demon King's army, and Caleb could guarantee that the demons had not lied to him. Many were shocked to hear the torture Caleb had put the demons through to get the information he wanted, and even more shocked to hear how calmly he spoke about it. But Jeremy still couldn't make the connection between the Beastman princess and the battle against the Demon King. Caleb explained that there was a large beastman state in the south. They prefer to remain neutral and have not yet intervened in the conflict between humans and demons. Jeremy realized that Caleb was going to ask the beastmen for help, but he doubted that such a bunch of cowards, who were afraid of demons like fire, would agree to help them. But Maya knew that the beastmen soldiers were much stronger than Jeremy could imagine. They have excellent physical fitness and heightened senses, and have repeatedly repelled the Demon King's army's attempts to occupy their lands. Jeremy didn't understand why the beastmen decided to remain neutral with the demons, and what prevented them from attacking the Demon Kingdom and destroying it. The elf explained that despite all the strength of the beastmen, they were still not strong enough, and there were not enough of them to completely destroy the Demon King's army, and the main forces of the demons were directed at humans. But Caleb knew that if the beastmen and the sacred state united, they would have a much better chance of winning. Finally, the classmates understood the reason why Caleb was talking about the beastman princess, and that he wanted to save the princess in order to use her as an advantage in negotiations with the beastmen. They were right, because now that they knew the route the princess was being taken and how many guards were around her, he wanted to use Jeremy and his team as bait. The explosion is intended to attract the enemy's attention and cause confusion in their squad, while Caleb, as usual, will operate in the shadows. The plan was clear and logical enough, but there were still a few questions. The classmates did not understand why the sacred state had not yet united with the army of beastmen. Maya explained that the beastmen disliked the demons primarily because the demons looked down on everyone. But in the past, beastmen suffered discrimination and persecution from humans, who called them subhumans. The exiled beastmen formed an alliance, and naturally they do not want to have anything to do with humans. The classmates doubted that they would be able to form an alliance with the beastmen, given the complexity of their relationship with the sacred country. This was exactly why Caleb needed some kind of trump card, and in a way, kidnapping the princess was a huge stroke of luck, especially considering that she was captured by the Demon King's army. Maya explained that the beastmen valued blood ties, so if they saved the princess, the beastmen would at least agree to negotiate with them. When his classmates had heard the gist of the problem and were silent, Caleb asked if they were willing to try to follow his plan, because if they continued to sit on their hands, nothing would change anyway. Jeremy clearly didn't trust Caleb, because he was always showing up out of nowhere at the right time to try to solve their problems, and always acting like he knew everything better than anyone else. Seeing his leader's anger, his friend asked that despite his anger, Jeremy not forget that it was his decision that would determine not only the outcome of the battle, but perhaps the preservation of all their lives. Understanding such responsibility, Jeremy knew that in fact, he had no chance to abandon such a well-thought-out plan, and he agreed to follow Caleb and help him in implementing it.